bit of a calm now. I'm watching the streets too. Not a whole lot of people on the streets. Maybe a couple of trucks, a van drove by, but not a whole lot when normally this street here, Banyan Boulevard, would be packed with cars back and forth, especially this time of night on a Saturday. There'd be a lot of people wanting to go downtown West Palm Beach here, but we're not seeing that right now. Things are very quiet. You see the courthouse there in the background, and not a lot of rain at the moment. And I was checking the observations at the airport. We haven't picked up a ton of rain yet at PBIA, but farther down to the south, where those feeder bands just coming in one after another, starting to definitely add up there.
All right, James.
Sure is, and we want to actually going to show you some of that right now because our Jason Hackett is on Facebook Live, and I think we're going to go to that and listen in.
Okay, I'm going to run in.
Trying to get out there. Hello to everybody out there on WPTV. We are here at the NBC6 studios, our sister station, down in Miami, where the rain has been on and off. The rain and the heavy weather has been on and off. 1 minute you'll have sheets of rain coming down, crazy wind, crazy lightning as well. And then you'll have moments like this where it is relatively calm. I don't know if you can see that out there. The sheets of wind, rain going out there. It's interesting. It gets really heavy, and then gets really calm for a few minutes. And here it is, picking up again. Huge flashes of lightning. Actually, the power here at the building went out. Huge lightning strike here in the area. Complete darkness here in this parking lot. Couldn't see anything out here, and then the power came back. But it's coming and going in waves.
So bear with us for the next 24 to 36 hours. We're going to use every tool at our disposal to bring you coverage. Jason Hackett, Facebook Live. My old stomping grounds, NBC6 Miami. Technically, it's in Miramar in Southwest Broward, about 8 to 10 miles inland, but you could see the lightning strikes behind them. Of course, the weather south to north moving, so the impact they're feeling quieter where James was, but those bands are going to work their way in our direction. And we know we're so used to describing things, but having pictures do it for us. We're mindful that many of you are going to be without power soon. We want to remind you again, we'll be as descriptive as we can of what we're seeing. We're on our WPTV.com site, streaming coverage there, our WPTV Facebook page, and on our ESPN 106.3, 106.3, ESPN FM 106.3, streaming our coverage for you. So we'll be bringing you the sights and sounds and descriptions of what's going on, multiple ways to stay with us. Hope you still have us on TV, but we realize that it's going to be problematic after a while.
And streaming on our Facebook page as well.
That's right.
We hope we've created enough ways for you to stay in touch and see what's going on even when the power goes out. Going to go down to the Glades area. The wind really starting to kick up there as well. And News Channel 5's Michelle Casada has our story.
The wind is really starting to pick up here in Clewiston, and you can see right behind me here, the trees are just kind of wavering back and forth. These palm trees, we've seen palm fronds falling from the trees, just kind of rolling around the grass, flying across the area here. This is right outside Clewiston High School. This is a shelter that has opened up for evacuees in the area, for people actually even coming from the west, trying to get away from Naples, Fort Myers area. And we talked to one woman earlier today who told me that she was going to stay with a friend in Naples, and then that friend was evacuating her home. So she said, all right, I'm going to start driving east. But of course, running into the issue with gas, as we've seen with so many people trying to flee and find a shelter, find a safe place to go. They've been running into gas stations that have been closed or run out of gas. And she told me that she found this place, it was a safe haven for her.
I was like, I don't want to drive any further. because I'm going to be out of gas and I'm not going to be able to get, go. If I had to go behind a building or whatever, with a car, I said I could do that, but I didn't want to, risk it. I don't know this area. So I had my phone was dying, so my sister was calling places, so she ended up calling the sheriff's department, and they came out and they're like, "Come on down." So
that's great.
Here
so
I am.
Doing the right thing.
Yeah, and I said I don't have crates. I said I wasn't expecting to come to the shelter, so I don't have crates for the dogs. So they went and brought crates for the dogs, and I have the cats in there too, but they were in crates. But yeah, so it's really nice.
And it's a good thing she found this shelter when she did. We have seen the weather conditions worsen as the time has passed. When we first got here, the winds weren't that strong. Now we are seeing those wind gusts pick up a little bit. We've seen quick downpours in the area as well. So definitely not safe to be on the roads, even if you're heading east. Palm Beach County has that curfew in place, so definitely be where you're supposed to be, shelter at home, hunker down, wherever that is. We're going to toss it back to you guys from Clewiston. We'll talk soon.
All right. And, we remind, too, you and I have been out in the field plenty. Our crews are out there, but they know and already have identified the places they will be taking shelter inevitably when you cannot be outside. So we appreciate all the work that all our reporting and photography teams are doing across the region from Southwest Florida through here and beyond.
And, just one note, I don't recall in the hurricanes of 04-05 that there were any pet shelters. This is, I think, a relatively new thing that they're establishing shelters where you're allowed to bring your pets, and that's certainly vitally important to people. And many of them won't go to a shelter if they can't bring their pets. So that was a really nice thing, too, for that woman from the West Coast to be able to find a shelter that also took her animals.
It's nice to see, because some of your pets sometimes is your emotional
For
bond.
sure.
We all know that helps you get through the storm. You're comforting your pet, and the pet's comforting you. So we certainly get it.
Yep. Wanda Moore's in Wellington right now. She was just live on Twitter a couple of minutes ago, and the rain and the wind picked up. Let's look at that.
We're talking about the feeder bands coming in. Here we go. Like the heavy winds, loud thunder. We've seen lightning, and of course now the really, really heavy rainfall. Just a little bit ago, we were actually we had a tornado warning here, so we took shelter somewhere, and then a police officer or a deputy, I should rather say, came by and escorted us away because they thought that we were looting a pharmacy or planning on looting a pharmacy there. So he escorted us to a safer spot here at the mall in Wellington. I can't even see me anymore. There you go. But yeah, like I said, the rain really picking up at this hour, and the winds as well, and lightning. So again, the tornado warning here has been canceled as of 8 p.m. But you can just see those feeder bands that we were talking about going through. They're really strong, and you can see those effects now. So again, I'm under a shelter, and I'm completely drenched at this point. So make sure that you stay inside. All right, thanks. Bye.
All right, we're going to rescue a raincoat for Wanda, who's doing intrepid work for us out there. Power outages, of course, will be the huge concern. When will power come back on? You may be listening to us on one of our streaming capabilities right now, but if you're out of power, we know a lot of people are going to be joining you, and FPL has, at last count, 13,000 workers of their own and from out of state poised for what will be a massive, if not historic, power restoration. A lot of that on the southwest Florida coast, but we're going to have plenty to do here, too.
Exactly. Actually, let's go to Ashley Henson. She's in the newsroom where I look at where the power is out right now. Ashley?
Yeah, guys, one of those power lines is down right now across all lanes of traffic on Hypoluxo Road. We just got this tweet from Boynton Beach Police. It's actually just west of High Ridge Road, and they're telling people to seek alternate routes. Of course, there is a curfew in place, so who they're speaking to really is those legitimate crews that need to be out there right now, whether it be paramedics, police officers, people who have to be out on the roads. And I want to take you to this, also some more damage across our area. This is Palm Beach County Water Utilities Twitter page down here about 24 minutes ago or so. They tweeted out that they were responding to a power failure in Delray with generators with their lift stations for the wastewater collection system. And then you can see here in this video, it looks like they are there now. Their response crews reestablishing power at those lift stations. They tweeted that about 16 minutes ago or so. So again, a lot of damage starting to come through, and we're continuing to monitor these social media feeds, and we'll let you know if we find anything else, guys.
Our first responders out and about, but again, when the winds get too severe, they're going to have to find shelter, so there'll be a period of time. And it's a reminder again, be off the roads, be with your loved ones now, really well on into Monday to not only weather the storm, but then allow emergency crews to get out and help you get life back to normal.
So many people have taken advantage of being in a safe place during the storm. And even though the cone has shifted and overall it's gotten better for our part of the state, clearly we're in for rough weather over the next 24, 48 hours. And plenty of people are in shelters. We sent our John Shainman up to Indian River County and to talk to the volunteers and how they're coping with these stressful days and nights.
The sound of the approaching storm, muted by the twinkling of the ivories.
Well, I'm not a professional. Well, I'm an artist.
Roy McClendon Jr.'s wife works at Oslo Middle School, for now a shelter in Indian River County. So he's been doing a little bit of everything.
Unloading cars, bringing them into the rooms, and doing every little bit of thing I can for the situation.
But it's at the piano where he's having the biggest impact.
Music calms people down.
Sadie the service dog is who calms Pat Peterson down. She and her sister Joyce Sheets, who'd come up from Boca Raton, now in what they call their own Ritz-Carlton.
They were awesome. They have a great team here. They can't do enough for us.
And then there were those not working at the shelter who just wanted to help. John Cunningham looked around to see what he had and dropped off what he could offer.
Why not? I mean, if people need it, why not help them? You know, I mean, there's plenty of it to go around.
And by it, maybe he meant a sense of community and friendship. And good feelings during these stressful nights. In Indian River County, John Shainman, WPTV, News Channel 5.
That's really turning a not so hotel-like experience into something that's quite pleasant and nice. That was really great.
The best part of the human spirit at a tough time. It's nice to see people rise to help each other. We've been seeing a lot of that, by the way.
Absolutely.
So many of you have reached out, and that's the one ray of optimism in what is a very tough time, to know that a lot of good folks like you are out there who are going to make a big, big difference in the days, weeks, and months to come.
That's right. As often as we can, we're going to show you live pictures from various places around South Florida, and you're looking right now at Ocean Drive in Miami Beach.
The famed South Beach.
Yep, that's right, South Beach. And many of you watching us have probably been down and been a tourist around South Beach. It's a really neat place to go.
This is a night where typically this place would be
packed
and pulsing with nightlife. And to think not 30 hours ago, there was the frantic warning because we thought the storm surge, because of the path of Irma, would push right up Biscayne Bay on the East Coast, and the same kind of dire warnings that our friends along the southwest coastline are facing now, they've been facing here. Many, many people heeded the cautionary note to get off Miami Beach and the barrier islands there. Now those concerns have shifted much more to our friends on the southwest Florida coast, and all of our hearts go out to everybody in peril's way tonight.
Exactly. We want to go to the phones right now. We have Congressman Ted Deutsch. Actually, he's in Boca Raton and is going to tell us a little bit about what he's been experiencing. First off, Congressman, tell us what it's like right now where you are.
Well, thanks for having me. We've seen the storms come through. We spent some time in the safe room during the hurricane warning, right that applied to the area where we are now, and over the course of the day, and really the past couple of days, I think what we've seen more than anything else is people first taking care of themselves and securing their homes, but really turning, just like that segment you just had, turning to their neighbors and making sure that everyone's okay, and in visiting shelters. The work that's being done by volunteers, Red Cross volunteers, and others is really remarkable. I'm so glad that as the storm now kicks up, we're going into this with people understanding that we're going to be inside, hunkering down for a good another day plus, and we're going to see lots of tropical storm force winds, and you want to stay inside, you want to stay safe, and then whatever happens once the storm passes through, we'll be there again to take care of one another and to get back on our feet. And hopefully, once we take care of ourselves, it certainly looks, from all we've seen, like there's going to be the need for us to turn west and help our fellow Floridians recover from what appears to be a really catastrophic situation.
Congressman Deutsch, amplify on that. Of course, first and foremost, your concern will be to the people in our region. Talk about the efforts that we're going to be looking at. We just took such a damaging, horrific blow from Harvey in Texas, and now, by all indications, a catastrophic series of events that are going to befall our friends on the southwest Florida coast, up and down that coastline. Talk about the kind of commitments going to be needed, what you will be involved in to help marshal the early resources and the sustained resources that we are going to need in the state for a long time to come.
Sure. Well, we've had conversations with FEMA now for many days. It's been clear for a week that this was going to be a major storm, that Irma was going to move through the entire state of Florida. Fortunately for our neighbors, the storm has shifted to the west, and it looks like it won't be as bad here. But the damage throughout the state is going to be devastating. So FEMA has millions of gallons of water and millions of meals and blankets and cots and generators and blue tarp ready to go, that with the resources and the personnel to ensure that it can be distributed. I want to be sure, and we've told FEMA this, that they're in a position to move very quickly when this storm passes through to get out and help people where they are. Everyone has asked me over these past few days, how are we going to be able to do this? How can FEMA help in this recovery given the massive commitment they've made to Houston? And the answer is pretty clear. FEMA is the federal government's emergency response agency. That's what FEMA does. It's emergency management. And we're going to have an emergency situation in Florida. It's not a question of can they, it's a question of how do we make sure that they do, because their services are going to be needed in conjunction with state and local government and so many volunteer efforts that are going to be crucial in rebuilding as well.
Congressman, I remember vividly after Hurricane Andrew in 1992, I covered it and I lived in the community. My home was not badly damaged. I lived in the north part of the county. But after a while, it became clear they needed the kind of help that only the military in many ways could provide. And we all remember when the Army finally came in full force to really take over command and control. FEMA, of course, far more robust than then, but do you rule out perhaps bringing the Army in a much more robust way because of the kind of logistics they may have, or not may have, do have, and may be able to bring to bear on what's going to be such a wide swath of our Sunshine State?
Well, it's a good question, and as a start, I had a discussion at the Emergency Operations Center with the National Guard officials who were there, and there's 7,000 National Guard in Florida and thousands more who are ready to come in. They're going to play a crucial role. But depending upon what we see, you're right, we've got to be honest about this. With a 15-foot storm surge potentially in Fort Myers and the possibility of a Category 3 storm or more going straight over the Tampa Bay area, it's going to require a massive logistical effort to ensure that the process of rebuilding can go forward very quickly. There are going to be enormous needs in taking care of people and making sure that they're okay, but then also moving forward quickly to help get people and communities back on their feet. That's your reference to what happened after Andrew, I think, is an important one. It's going to take that kind of effort. And again, remember, this is not just South Florida, now East Coast and West Coast, but going up through the central part of the state, and it looks like it'll still be a hurricane going all the way up through Tallahassee and out of Florida. So we've said and we've expressed our concerns that this would be an unprecedented event, and I'm afraid it looks like that's likely to be the case.
We will wait and see exactly what happens, but it will be a monumental task, no doubt. And Congressman Ted Deutsch, we appreciate your time tonight, and good luck to you as we continue to get through some rough weather.
Thanks, and thanks so much, sincerely, on behalf of all of your viewers who are so grateful for the incredible detail you provide and the attention that you bring to all of the issues that we're worried about now. It's very much appreciated.
Well, thank you for your service to our community. A lot of people are going to be counting on you and your colleagues in Congress. As you well know, it's going to be a tremendous challenge for all Floridians. We thank you for your time, and be safe.
Thank you. You as well.
Let's go over to Steve Weagle now, get the very latest on what's happening with the bands moving in across our area in particular, Steve.
Yeah, definitely. I promise you I'd keep an eye on the radar and let you know if there's anything that really concerned me coming into South Florida. And there's one right here. This one's working in around Fort Pierce in the next 5 to 10 minutes. In fact, the leading edge of the rain is already worked in. This has a dramatic, what we call a couplet associated with it, which is very, very strong winds coming at the radar and very strong winds going away. There is definitely some rotation aloft, and it looks like it is roughly about in this area right here. So there's no tornado warning in effect. There's no warning at this point. But if you live in the Fort Pierce area, watch this storm cell. I'm telling you right now, there's the Doppler radar is indicating some rotation with it, and it has very strong gusty winds. And look at it, it's actually building down a little bit as it comes in along the coastline through Port St. Lucie and Hutchinson Island. Very concerned about that storm cell right there. And the wider view actually has several of them off the coast. This is that same line that I've been watching all evening. We actually had a tornado warning an hour or two ago up around Vero and Fort Pierce. That's that feeder band that's working in. So watch out for that cell. There's another one right behind it. And in fact, way off the coastline, there are 2 or 3 others in behind it too. And there's another line of storms. I don't know if I can get too far down here. Oh, there's the...
This is the little couplet you were talking about here. It's very close to shore right now.
Right here. You can see it right there. See how it's bright red here.
We'll put the tracker on it there too. I tracked. It's moving about 30 miles an hour, maybe a smidgen less than that though.
So it's coming in, first Hutchinson Island,
very quickly, yeah,
obviously, and just south of the Fort Pierce Inlet, and then it works in across Port St. Lucie and Fort Pierce. So US 1, and then we have 95. Actually, this is closer. That's US 1 right there, I think. So this is moving in very quickly at the coast. They're right there. I'm not saying there's a tornado or a water spout or anything else, but I'm saying we're watching this one closely. This is a storm cell that has a little bit of a punch to it. There's some times of arrival showing up too in the next few minutes. Yeah, so this is coming in across just south of the Fort Pierce Inlet very quickly. Everything's moving about 45 miles an hour to the west. So it doesn't take long for it to, even if it's 10, 15 miles off the coastline, it doesn't take much to make a landfall here and then work quickly. So St. Lucie Village, and then of course the northern areas of St. Lucie County and Lakewood Park. It looks like it'll just be the south of Lakewood Park, but that's another area that we'll watch. Sunland Gardens, Fort Pierce.
A lot of lightning strikes too. Look at that.
Well, that's part of the kind of signature that I watch for. And yeah, look at all that lightning.
This is it. They just issued a tornado warning. So
there you go.
There you go.
They should be watching us. All right.
It's just right now, tornado warning, St. Lucie County until 10 o'clock.
So there it is right there. And so this is going to come in along the coastline around Fort Pierce. And there's Lakewood Park right there. And this is what we're watching right there because of this dramatic red and then that dramatic shift to green. That's rotation. Winds coming at you, winds going away from you. We're not going to be Doppler radar experts by the time the night's done. And the lightning, for whatever reason, well, it's upward, warm air rising. This is a storm that you just get, there's a lot of activity, there's a lot of warm rising air very quickly, a lot of instability, and you get a lot of lightning embedded in a very small area. Almost every tornado that's touched the ground in this area that I've seen in the last 20 years usually has a very small, compact area of lightning with it at the same time. And this one has it, and it has the couplet with it. Look at how all that lightning is just right there. It's a nasty storm. If you're anywhere in this area, I would get in your safe room and stay there for the next 15, 20 minutes until this storm moves out.
That's about right at Fort Pierce Inlet. So the little community just south of Fort Pierce Inlet and then north of there going all the way up there.
I'll tell you what, flip to Live Viper 5 Max and we'll get a better view, a little bit better view of some neighborhoods here. There's the tornado warning box, right, the polygon showing up in red. The winds, so at the airport right now, 31. Those will climb, I guarantee it. And the area, the main area of concern is still off the coast by probably a mile or two.
Out here somewhere.
Yeah, right in right in that area right there. We got a couple dozen lightning strikes. So this comes in. This is very close to the inlet, right?
Yeah, the inlet's right here. See.
Okay, and there's US 1 right there, and then we have 95 and the turnpike right back in here. So this is right. Anyone downtown Fort Pierce, if you're anywhere within 5 miles of the Fort Pierce Inlet. You want to get in a safe room for this one because this is a dangerous weather situation. This is a storm that has no confirmed reports of a tornado. Well, it's still over water, but there's a signature here, rotating winds aloft, and we have, again, that concentrated area of lightning that always concerns me. I always watch for that and the chance for severe weather. So there it is coming in along it's through starting to work in the inlet right now.
Right.
And downtown Fort Pierce.
Probably maybe right about on the barrier island now. So the mainland too, here from St. Lucie Boulevard, Orange Avenue, going through all of downtown Fort Pierce, historic Fort Pierce, and even a little bit farther south.
Winds picking up a little bit at the airport too, bumped up about 4 miles an hour. I guarantee the winds are much stronger than that though. When this is said and done, we'll watch that for a few minutes. That'll pop up probably to 45 or 55 miles an hour. And this is still just off the coast. So this is going to take a track right in the Fort Pierce Inlet and then downtown Fort Pierce and then quickly move in. I think the real threat here is very close to Orange Avenue, maybe a little north of Orange Avenue and then into 95. And the tornado warned area extends back now in toward 95 and there it is right there. So right along 95. There's the turnpike there as it heads up toward Orlando.
Even up to Indrio and Lakewood Park, too.
Yeah. Actually, go a little farther north because this area here all the way up into Oslo and even just south of Vero, this is also part of that storm cell, too. But the rotation, I think, James, would be just around Queens Cove, around the probably just north of the power plant.
Yeah, let's punch that one up again with Max 1. Oh, it's looking very divine now for sure. If that's not a tornado, it's very gusty winds right now.
See that right there?
Yeah.
So bright green.
And look at the lightning following it,
bright
too.
Red, and a whole bunch of lightning right on top of it. There's something going on here. And if you're in downtown Fort Pierce, anywhere near the inlet, get in your safe room for the next 15 minutes. Stay safe from this one. I'm not saying there's a tornado out there. There's a tornado warning. And this is a dangerous storm. That's what I'm telling you. And it's coming in, and it's going to work through downtown Fort Pierce and eventually very quickly to 95 and the Turnpike. So I spotted that about 15 minutes ago, and then the warning popped up. And again, because everything's spinning around this hurricane very quickly, this is going to, it's almost into the inlet right now. But that's the real area concern right there. And there is the inlet right there. Is that right, James?
Yeah, the inlet, right about there, and all the way up to the Navy Museum is just north of the inlet, too.
So, you can see
anywhere in that area for sure.
The outline of the tornado warning. So it's back out here, and that polygon stretches back into 95. So that's, and it's holding together. Sometimes these things pop up. We were watching one about a half an hour ago that had fired up, and it just fizzled out. This one's holding together. And the Weather Service actually talked about that entire line all the way back in toward the Bahamas, and several of these little rotating cells. And Dave's watching those. Yell out, Dave, if you see any more way back to way back to the east toward the Bahamas. But this one is one that is just about to make it onto the coastline. So anywhere in this area.
There. So yeah, let me just name some streets there. If you live on these streets, you need to get into your safe room immediately here. Even if this isn't a tornado, it's very strong winds. Bimini Drive, Bermuda Beach Drive, Marina Drive, Lakeview Circle, the Tierra Towers condos there, Sands on the Ocean. These are all on the Hutchinson Island there, North Hutchinson Island. Anywhere near the Navy SEAL Museum. Jack Island Access Road there, Jackson Way, Shoreside Drive, Duneside Drive, and then after that, very quickly, Dixie Highway, Anchor Way, Chamberlain Boulevard, Yacht View Lane, St. Lucie Lane, and Dixie Highway, up US 1, 2, say from NACO or NACO Road, Juanita Avenue. The causeway, of course, that comes over from the inlet there, anywhere from that northward, too, and maybe a little bit southward, too. There's a Publix there right on the street, anywhere around that. San Marcos Avenue, Woodward Drive, Matanzas Avenue, San Marcos, all of those roads in there. If you're hearing those and you live close to those, it's still you. I can't rattle them all off, but you got to know some streets around you, and if you hear that, you want to take cover immediately. This could be a very serious situation.
There we go. I put the storm tracker on it too. So Fort Pierce, St. Lucie, Indrio, Paradise, a lot of spots you labeled off there, and Sunland Gardens that was mentioned earlier, and moving quickly toward 95 and the Turnpike.
And around the airport, too. Anything around the St. Lucie County Airport there.
Yeah, so a pretty populated area. A dangerous storm. Get in the safe room. Stay there until this warning is done, which should expire, I would think, by 10 o'clock, maybe before that, because it's been in effect for a while. But that's a nasty storm there that we're watching closely move into St. Lucie County in the
Just got a 41-mile-per-hour wind gust at the power plant.
There it is there.
64-mile-per-hour wind gust down in Broward just at 9:30.
What was that, Michael?
We have this to brace for, at least look forward to this kind of activity for quite some time. The potential for this.
I'm actually surprised that it fired up so quickly this evening, and it's been one after another. We got a little bit of a break in the last hour, but here we go with more tornado warnings. And I want to show you something on the radar. James just mentioned it, but to the south, around Lauderdale. Look at this.
And we're doing radio now for some of our viewers, so both visually and descriptively.
Oh yeah, that's right. We do have some power outages, don't we?
What are we seeing? But also just
look at the winds pick up in Lauderdale now. 28, 49, 53 miles an hour as that feeder band goes through. We had an earlier tornado warning in Lauderdale. The winds at Pompano, 41, 41 Oakland Park, 53 now in Hollywood. These are wind gusts. These are wind speeds that will cause power outages. And then even up around West Palm, we have some, at the airport, jump from 16 to 36, almost tropical storm force wind gusts. And I do not want to forget our friends on the Treasure Coast, where we still have that tornado warning, which is around Fort Pierce and the Lakewood Park area. That storm has now arrived at the coast, and it is right over the most dangerous part of that storm is right over the Intracoastal, and it looks like it should be heading very close to the airport. It's actually right over the airport at this point, and we'll notice the wind speed jump up even more as it goes through.
If we could ask a quick question from social media, we're getting some people responding right now, Steve, that are asking exactly what constitutes a safe room. And I know you spoke about this a couple hours ago, but it's worth repeating so people know and can plan ahead.
Yeah, a great point. Safe room is ideally a room on the lowest level of your house or where you're staying that is a windowless room, that is away from exterior walls, that you can stay and feel safe, that is hopefully a little bit better construction, and just ride out the worst of the storm. If you feel that where you are, that structure is being compromised, you can get in that safe room and stay there for up to a half an hour. But honestly, in Hurricane Andrew, that was a long period of time. I just don't see that type of winds sticking around for an extended period of time. So I think in this case, with this hurricane and the event on the east coast of Florida, you may have to stay in there for 30 minutes, but that's about it. And then that threat, which right now is over Fort Pierce, moves off quickly to the west. But in Hurricane Andrew, people were staying in their safe rooms for hours and hours. That's just not going to be the case this time, because it will be on the west coast of Florida, but not here, because we're not expecting winds like that. I think the strongest winds we should see overall will be strong tropical storm force. So we're looking at like 60 to 70 with maybe some higher gusts, and a little higher around the lake too. Can't forget about the lake.
And in general, Steve, safe rooms usually are bathrooms, because a lot of people, especially in Florida, if you have a lot of rooms with windows and you want to get away from anything that might break or compromise the room in that regard. So it's usually a bathroom, right?
Yeah, and it's all about compromise too, because sometimes your safe room we don't like to have safe rooms on exterior walls, but if it's a concrete wall that is between you and the outside, that's reasonable. Or if there is a wall that has a small window to the outside, That can be good too, or obviously if it's like a hurricane reinforced window, those are also reasonably good safe rooms. Underneath staircases, if you live in a 2-story house, those can be safe spots because it's a little bit better construction, and sometimes those staircases are near the middle of your house rather than on the sides. Just areas like that. Some people will pick laundry rooms in their house because they're usually windowless rooms and they're in the interior section of the house, which always helps. But now if you're looking around and you're like, well, I don't know where I should pick a safe room. I have this room that joins, the exterior walls right there to the outdoors. That may be your best spot. Sometimes it's not the ideal location, but it's where your best safe room would be if you have to stay there for a little while and the winds are, compromising where you are.
And Steve, as we talk about that, maybe we can put up a split screen as you talk about winds up and down the coast. This, again, an earth cam shot from Lauderdale, the intracoastal, and from what I can see, I believe 17th Street Bridge to the north in that image. That means the Port Everglades, is, if you could look backwards from this picture, would be right there if I'm identifying that correctly. And their wind speeds, the lights are on, so that's a bit of good news, but the wind speeds up and down the coast, if you can run through those.
Well, actually, Lauderdale, I just spotted 53 miles an hour at the airport, and that's about a mile or two away.
Yeah, 2 miles.
Hey, zoom in there, James. There's a look at it right there. So those are the temperatures. It better be the temperatures showing up. I don't want to see 80 miles an hour.
Give me a second.
Scare me for a second. There's so 53 at the airport and 40s elsewhere in Broward County. But that's that Peter band coming in, and you can see it on that earth cam shot there too. It looks pretty nasty. And once that moves through, they will get a break here in maybe 30 minutes, and there'll be kind of a lull in the storm, if you will, and then another feeder band comes in later tonight and overnight, and it's just kind of one after another with breaks between the two. But the problem is that with the advance of each consecutive one, the winds are usually a little bit stronger until you get near the core of the hurricane, where in this case we're dealing with a Category 3, almost a 4, and but that's way to the south. We're not expecting those winds here. That's a West Coast Florida issue.
While we have you right there, and while we're taking a few viewer questions, here's another one that came in, and I just heard this the other day, and I kind of cringed when I heard it because I think it's false. This person writes in, I just heard on another TV station, that doesn't matter, that you should throw your patio furniture into your pool if you have not brought it inside. And that's been on a long time myth, right?
Yeah, I just secure your patio furniture. Even if you put it up against, if you're in a rush, and putting it up against some walls on the exterior definitely helps rather than just kind of leave it outside. All that stuff becomes projectiles in even 40, 50 mile an hour wind. That's all blowing around. In stronger winds, it becomes a danger because it will start to break through windows, and that's flying debris at speeds. Strong tropical storm force winds will lift some of that stuff up, and it's now flying through the air, and it's a real danger at that point.
Well, and if the pool furniture...
Just continuing the tornado warning. The Weather Service just put it out. They're continuing the tornado warning here until 10 o'clock. And
so another 10 minutes. That's that cell that just came right in the Fort Pierce Inlet, and now it's starting to work in.
Over St. Lucie Village, Indrio, moving west at 25.
Can we flip quickly to Max 1, and we can take a look at the radar? We've lost that couplet a little. You can kind of track it. There it is, right there. So it's now crossing over the intracoastal now, but you see it's lost that definition that it had when it was just off the coast. But it's still a dangerous storm, and the Weather Service obviously feels that it's still dangerous because they extended that warning for another 10 minutes. So it's moving now toward 95, but it's crossed the intracoastal. At least the area that we're concerned about has crossed the intracoastal and is now working in through, actually.
And look at Lakewood Park, all the lightning too, just starting to fire up there.
I was just going to say, it looks like a good part of this storm is actually north of Fort Pierce Inlet. Yeah. Look at all this lightning that's really fired up here. That's what we've been seeing all evening.
There too.
We've been seeing these storms, these little couplets and these little spins off the coastline, and we'll watch them for 5 or 10 minutes, and they kind of fizzle out, and then some of them reform a little farther south or a little farther north in the actual storm. So it's a little bit of a hide-and-seek game where they'll pop up, we'll watch them, and then they disappear, and then a couple minutes later we'll spot them somewhere else. So it's tricky in hurricanes. You think everything would be well-defined and coming in at the coast, and it's not.
We do have one farther out there, too. Dave was just showing me, see it out there?
Right here? Oh, no, this one here.
Yeah, it looks pretty strong.
Yeah.
So that one's still a little whiles away, but we can probably give you a little bit heads up here.
And since we're showing velocities on TV, which I'm not a big fan of, but in this case it's very important to know exactly where that rotation is. The radar beam in this case is probably coming out of Melbourne, so here it's it's up in the sky, so it goes up at an angle, that radar beam, and it's measuring winds spinning aloft in the clouds. And as you get closer to the radar site, that level is a little bit lower, so you get a better idea. What we all want to know is what's going on the ground. We don't usually care what's going on at 5,000 feet. But in this case, the closer we are to the radar site, the better idea of what's going on near the surface in the ground where we all live.
Right, and again, we're talking, again, for those of you joining us from radio, the Lakewood Park area above Fort Pierce that you were just referencing, right, Steve?
Yes, and so that tornado warning is for another 8 minutes, and that storm is quickly moving toward 95. We go back to the Viper radar. I'll show you there it is right there, and it looks like the strongest winds may have shifted just a little farther north of the inlet and more into Lakewood Park. See how the winds are picking up at the airport, St. Lucie County Airport, 44 now, and I bet we'll see even a bigger bump than that. What happens is because it's an anemometer at the airport, there's a delay of 4 or 5 minutes before we get the actual wind speed on some of these. So as it comes in the next few minutes, now it's already to 95. That may bump up a little bit more. 44 miles an hour, that's tropical storm force wind gust.
Moving at a good clip. We have some driving pictures right there, Steve. Port St. Lucie.
Okay, so just to the south of where that storm is, and I don't know, that kind of looks like US 1 maybe. And so that line of rain is all the way down. James, maybe widen out just a little bit down into Port St. Lucie and down through Stewart. It kind of tapers, actually, it doesn't taper off, but it actually kind of works back to the west. Well, Port St. Lucie is such a large city that it looks like it's pretty good rain there, so it's probably more the communities around 95, back around Tradition and St. Lucie West and PGA Village that shot's from. Hard to say. But the tornado warning is to the north, and there's the polygon right there showing up in red, and that storm cell is almost out of it. We have another 6 minutes before that tornado warning's expired, and we could see more. I'm not going to say we are, but there's another pretty good cell off the coast about 15, 20 miles. Right, I think it's that one right there, James, or maybe it's the one in behind that. You can't. Showing the rain on the radar really doesn't show you anything about what's going on as far as rotation, unless you get one of those hook echoes.
Yeah, it's this one. It's like half an hour.
So right there.
Away.
So one after another.
So Steve, how do you tell when you're looking at the aftermath of a hurricane, what damage that might have been caused by a tornado and damage that would have been caused by the winds of the hurricane?
Sure. Well, tornado damage, there's several different ways, and that's why the Weather Service will do a storm survey after the fact. That with a tornado, as it goes through, your debris is over here, and it's over here, and it's behind you, and it's in front of you, because it's spinning, and it's just spreading all that debris everywhere. In straight line winds, which a lot of damage that we believe tornado causes, actually straight line winds. Those winds come down from the thunderstorm, they slam into the ground, they push all that debris forward. So let's say you're outside in the backyard and all that patio furniture is all in one direction forward. That's one of the indications that it could be straight line wind damage. You can also tell from vegetation too, if all the trees are down in one direction and the vegetation's all pushed in one way, that's an indication that it might be straight line winds.
And by the way, as we continue this, we're efforting a phoner with FPL. A lot of you are starting to pour in questions as the power outages mount, and we want to bring up some of the safety concerns some of you are bringing our way, so we're efforting that right now.
Right, exactly. I mean, we don't want to go far from you guys because we know you're in the middle of a
We'll interrupt you if we see anything else that concerns us.
Good. And it's going to be an active night, but we will be here 24/7 for quite a while.
And we encourage you to send in any questions you do have to the WPTV Facebook page, because one of them we want to talk to FPNL about is that a person wrote in and said, I have a tree in my backyard that's rubbing up against a power line and it's sparking. What do I do?
Well, the one thing he does is don't go near any power lines, sparking or not. Assume they're all live, assume they're all hot. We're going to wait for FPL. Theoretically, you call 911, but you may at this point get the same advice. Just number one, stay away from any down power lines. Whether you see them sparking or not, it's absolutely essential you stay away. FPL says they have, well, they say they have, and they do have new smart technology that can start detecting at their huge command and control center these power outages. But with the storm, it's going to be a while before they get to it. Nonetheless, it's not like the old days where you had to call in every outage. They know where they're happening.
Well, and now they have the app. Their app is, I downloaded it after we talked to Peter Robbins yesterday, and it's really pretty cool. You can, not only does it help you report an outage, or I would assume something like this that's going on, but it also gives you a timeline of when your power will be back on, which is what we all want to know anyway.
Right, and it's a rough timeline, and they basically do it first at a bigger regional level, and then you can go, I think it's county level, then you can go down a little bit more granularly down to your neighborhood level. Now, it's not perfect, but it gives you sort of a general sense of where you will be on power restoration.
Gives you some hope, too.
Sure, absolutely.
Because after a storm, and we've seen many down here in Florida when that power's not on for weeks, and it's 90-plus degrees with, I don't know, 2,000% humidity, it's, you really want your power back.
And not suggesting it will be weeks
in
our area.
I don't mean that. I just mean in the past it has been.
But they're going to be strained to the max with their resources, despite bringing in thousands of people from out of state. With the monumental challenge they're going to likely face on the southwest Florida coast, including, by FPL's own acknowledgement, probably having to rebuild parts of the grid if Irma creates the kind of damage we're expecting. It's going to be a task that FPL has never faced before. They're bringing people in from all over the country to tackle a challenge that will last for a long, long time. Our area, there's going to be damage. There already is. Hopefully, they expect they can get to that a lot more quickly.
And, I just want to reiterate, I think Ashley told us about this a little while ago, but this was out of Boynton Beach PD. They said that a power line was down across all lanes on High Palexo Road, west of High Ridge Road, so just west of I-95. So if you're going to go out, and no one should be going out and what's happening tonight and into tomorrow, but if you have to, beware High Palexo and High Ridge with that power line that's down.
At this point, if you're going out, you're endangering your own life, and you're endangering the lives of first responders, who at some point are going to have to pull back, by the way.
When the winds get too strong.
We need them there, the heroes that they all are. They've been there up to now. They're going to have to take shelter so they can be there after the storm. So we don't need to put any more strain on resources, because the resources are there to take the strain off of us after the storm. So it's going to be, again, we're just coming up on the 10 o'clock hour. We're just really feeling the beginning effects of Irma. So again, cabin fever can set in times like this, but we all have to be patient.
Yep. All right. We have right now, we're going to Andrew Lofholm. He's doing a Facebook Live. We're going to dip in and see what it looks like down in Boca Raton.
I saw that lightning flash.
Andrew, you there?
Can you hear us, Andrew?
There we go. There's a frond across the road right here. We're going to go around that.
Okay, so we were... there you are.
Going live on TV here.
Yeah.
We are. You're on TV, Andrew.
Kelly, Michael, I think you just tossed to us. So we're at the Glades exit here in Boca Raton, driving around, showing people. What I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep. Go for it.
Can you guys hear us down there?
We got you loud and clear.
Okay, so we're on a little bit of delay. All right, we're on TV. So we're down. We just exited Glades Road. We're about to head back south on 95. We've been doing a tour of what Boca Raton has looked like for the last 45 minutes ago or so. So we've been driving around showing people. Rain so far down here has been relatively light, picking up at times. Right now it's picking little bit more.
All right, sorry, Andrew, we have to interrupt that real quickly, showing us the view in Boca. I want to go back to Steve and James because there's an extension of our warning.
Yeah, the tornado warning for St. Lucie County has been extended to 10:30 now. That's that same storm cell that we were tracking way off the coastline. So now the warning box is now well past 95 and the turnpike, and a turnpike there. So this one is working into, well, pretty much right down the turnpike now in St. Lucie County. So this is until 10:30 tonight. There's still some rotation with it, maybe a little bit of a signature there on the radar. Heavy rainfall, lots of lightning with this one too, and of course, if you see anything out there, please let us know. As far as damage, no reports of any kind of damage and no reports of a tornado on the ground, but still a very dangerous situation. And we have noticed this persistent rotation with this thunderstorm cell. So that's why we have continued that tornado warning until 10:30. So it's extended for another half an hour. I don't know if it'll hold together that long, but either way, it's one that we're going to keep an eye on and moving at this point right through the turnpike. And of course the turnpike slides up eventually up into Okeechobee County and western Indian River County. There's the area that we're most concerned about. Actually, James,
maybe just crossed over 95, maybe.
Yeah, there's 95 there. There's the turnpike.
Spanish Lakes community, maybe.
So a little something going on there. You want to pop up oh, actually the Doppler is on. If we could flip to max 1, maybe we could see some rotation and maybe get an idea of exactly where the core of this is. Well, let's see. So it would be this. It would be right in this area here. Yes, it would be right here. So that's what we're watching on the radar, and it seems to be intensifying a little bit. Not quite as well defined as it was off the coastline, but there's enough of a concern that the Weather Service decided to extend that tornado warning for another 30 minutes as it moves. Well, it's going about at least 40 miles an hour. It's just racing in along the coast, and now it's heading up the turnpike at the same time. So a big weather, and you can actually see the warning box on the Doppler. So there's that polygon right there, and there's the area that we're very concerned about. Where if there's anything happening as far as a tornado on the ground, it would be right on the back edge of this, right, and crossing 95 and about to cross the turnpike at the same time. So let's go back to the Viper radar, and I'll show you that storm cell. We'll take a look at some of the other rains that are coming in through the area, and that's on Live Viper 5 Max. So if we can flip back to that, we'll show you that rain as it comes in along the coastline, and it's just one feeder band after another that is coming in. There's also, and James noticed this a couple of minutes ago, this line that's coming in around South County, right here. So let's put it in perspective here. So we have Delray, Atlantic Avenue. It's already into Boca, and Highland Beach, and we have Boynton Beach just to the north. So this entire line too. This is a really well-defined feeder band that'll come in, and again the winds pick up 20, maybe 30 miles an hour, and the rains, just torrential tropical downpours. James was outside reporting about a half an hour ago. It's just you literally wear the humidity out there. It's so humid.
Very heavy, yeah.
Yeah, because it's just a very tropical air mass with the hurricane to the south. But there's another line that we're watching closely. Did you see any rotation with that?
No, there wasn't with this. This looked all like straight wind, but there are pretty good velocity signatures in there, maybe 40 plus 40, 50 mile per hour winds as this pushes on in. It was mostly straight line winds though.
And that actually looked like it might be the case with the tornado warning in St. Lucie County, more straight line wind situation rather than rotating storm.
Yeah, we just got a report in 53 mile per hour wind gust there at the St. Lucie County Airport.
So we started off our constant 25 to 35 mile an hour wind gusts. They really bump up as these bands go through, and this is one here that's coming in through Boca and Delray. And actually the winds there at Pompano actually dropped a little bit. Actually it worked through, and now it's starting to drop off a little bit, and probably drop off a little bit more. But if you live in Boca and all the way up through Lake Worth and Lantana and Manalapan, this will pick up your winds pretty quickly. So the leading edge of this, and it's now into Atlantic Avenue and US 1 and A1A, and then it kind of cuts back in toward Glades and the turnpike in Boca. They're just swinging around. Remember this, the center and the eye of the hurricane is over 100 miles south, so this is just rotating around that big mass that's on the north coast of Cuba, just spinning these big feeder bands around the area. I don't know if I can get the wider view here for a second to show you just how massive this thing is, and it just encompasses hundreds and hundreds of miles, and that's one of the reasons it's going to be around for quite a while. Actually, if we can flip to Max 2, keeping the director busy here, you can see the eye just off the north coast of Cuba, and it went through a little bit of a wobble or two in the last couple of hours, but now it's on that almost northwest track toward Key West. If we can bring up Max 2, I'll show you that as it lifts off the north coast of Cuba. There it is right there. So there's the coastline of Cuba. There's the eye of our hurricane. There's Key West. And that's what we're watching. We're watching that this here heads in this direction, because that's the official forecast track, and we should get this somewhere in the Key West area after midnight, and then in the early morning hours just off the coast of not the early morning, late morning through the afternoon off Naples, and then eventually Fort Myers. So that's what we're watching with that. But just look, this may be the most amazing hurricane I've ever seen, because it just will not let up. As soon as you think it may have weakened enough that it's going to finally die off, it just regenerates. All this dry air that was on the western side of it just fills in with these bright reds, which are the cold cloud tops. It's so well protected. When you see hurricanes weaken, what happens is the yellows and the greens here, the dry air gets entrained near the center, in the core, and that's pretty much the death of a hurricane at that point. This one, it won't have anything to do with that. It just keeps going and keeps strengthening. It spent 8 to 12 hours over or near Cuba, and it didn't phase this hurricane at all. It still held together. It went over all those islands. It interacted with the mountains of Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and here we are would probably be a Category 4 at 11 o'clock or 5 in the morning.
Yeah, we did get the 10 o'clock update, just a change of position. I don't see anything different. 120 mile per hour winds, moving to the northwest now at 7. I wanted to look too, Steve. I want to show you this over here, looking at the velocities from that feeder band coming in off Boca and Delray and Boynton. Does look like there could be some rotation in there. And remember, we were talking about the lightning with it. Well, you see that lightning just kind of moving on through. It's not quite as intense as the one in Fort Pierce was, but still some very gusty winds with that as it's pushing ashore. And it's really pushing ashore right now. From now to the next 10-15 minutes, it's moving very, very quickly here. And you see the greens here and then the reds indicating some gusty winds moving on in. A lot of lightning strikes when it was farther offshore, but now it has come down a little bit. A lot of times when you see this, like Steve was talking about, this is in the upper levels of the atmosphere. Sometimes this can get organized and spin up into a tornado. It doesn't quite look that way right now. All it looks like is very gusty winds, but that possibility is there, and that's anywhere from, say, I would even say Lake Worth down to Boynton, Delray, Boca, probably picking up some gusty winds right now as this starts to move on through, and the rain is right around here, so picking up some heavy rainfall, probably blowing sideways there. If anything, probably 40 to 50 mile per hour winds as this feeder band moves on through, and we see the lightning strikes there. Let me just jump out of here real quick, and I'll show you what the regular radar looks like on that, and also where the storm is, like Steve was talking about. It's finally starting to pull away from Cuba, but look at those bands coming up. Those are going to be coming up a little bit farther. This is the strongest one, Steve, that we've seen in our area for sure. Yep. Just moving through Boca and all of South County right now. This is by far the strongest feeder band that we've seen moving through. Out ahead of it, yes, we've had all those tornado warnings, but this one here, very powerful.
Hey, let's go back up to on Viper. We still have the tornado warning for St. Lucie County. That is until 10:30. Let's take a look at that storm cell. It's still out there. We still have the tornado warning, right? I believe. I don't think that's been discontinued. And it's still, right. There's the warn box right there as it pushes west
It's just almost out of the box.
It's actually, yeah, it's moving so quickly. It's outracing the warning polygon as it moves now across, well, pretty much, there's the turnpike there. So
yeah, maybe crossing the turnpike as it moves out west.
Yeah. There are winds. All right, I think John Shaman's up in St. Lucie County. John, can you hear me? And if you can, let me know where you are.
I can, Steve. In fact, I am right by the turnpike exit in Fort Pierce along Okeechobee Road. We just came back this way from the St. Lucie County EOC, which is in the western part of the county, several miles inland, where Midway and Okeechobee Road meet. Right now, it's it is an ominous sky, but not heavy winds at this moment. We're a couple miles south of, I think you were mentioning Lakewood Park, right?
Yes, yeah. That area didn't pick up the strongest winds, but definitely close.
Yeah, we again right now we've got a little bit of traffic on the turnpike from what I can see. Okeechobee Road itself right now, the truck stops that had been filling folks with gas for many days have boarded up. There are very few lights on what is a very busy stretch, as folks know. This part of Okeechobee Road in Fort Pierce is right between where I-95 and the Florida Turnpike meet. No heavy winds right now, but I will say probably 15 minutes ago, Steve, I think when you were talking about the first batch of storms that were going through, we were driving along Okeechobee Road, coming back east, and the sky was just completely lit up. At times it was almost like daylight.
Yeah, that was that core of lightning as it went through your area, John. I know exactly where you are. And did you notice the winds pick up as that cell went through?
We could see, yeah. I mean, you know, as you know, there's not a lot of light pollution out there. We did see some of the trees were going. It would have been very hard for me to measure how heavy or how hard the winds were blowing at that point. But for us, it was really, videographer Ryan and myself, we were just commenting on, wow, that's quite a light show there. Right now, and there was just a couple more lightning bolts that just went off to the west, just on the west part of the turnpike, it looked like. You're as not a meteorologist, you have the wispy clouds. You've got kind of a smoky, dark sky, if that makes any sense. It's not a black night, if you will. It's almost as if it were gray. It's definitely a little bit ominous, but at this moment, no real dangerous weather. But again, I can't see what's maybe a quarter mile down the road.
Sound like a weather guy, John.
I'm trying.
Good description. Thank you for that. And be safe, because there's another cell coming in right after the one that you just dealt with. It'll come in probably in the next 20 to 30 minutes. It's a line that's a feeder band line that's up on the Treasure Coast, and there's just one after another that we've been watching. There's two areas that we're watching. One is off Vero and Fort Pierce, and the second line is coming in across Palm Beach County. And in between that, there's some activity, but the strongest storms seem to be about from Port St. Lucie north up into Vero and Sebastian, and then down around, well, now actually almost West Palm down into Boca. So just be safe, and we'll definitely let you know if there are additional warnings that pop up.
Depth of the storms that we're getting
incredible.
Our edges of this, and then you think of the people in Key West. I must tell you, every time I see that radar image, my sister last night watching your coverage nonstop, she described the cloud tops, I believe they are.
Yeah.
Said it looked like she said it looks evil, and when you try and kind of put your human emotions to it, you see the evil eye of that storm bearing down on the Florida Keys that we all love so much, and your heart just goes out to the people who are going to be in the path of this for the next 48 hours.
Really, I don't know if James wants to jump in, but I don't remember a hurricane quite like this in a long time. And I realize it's having an impact on us, but this is just a storm that just is tenacious, just will not give up, and has done so much damage already. And luckily, it looks, and I'm pretty confident that we're not going to get the worst of this storm, but it still has another day to 2 days to go as it moves up the west coast of Florida, which is really amazing, because the people on the West Coast thought they weren't going to be dealing with much at all.
And Kelly, you've been here in this community on the air for 31 years, and I know it's flashbacks for you to 2004 and 5.
Mm-hmm. It's different. It's hard to, and Steve, I know, and you and James, all of us, we feel the same way. Even if you went through other hurricanes, this one's different. And
in many ways, yeah.
So, it's been like, I don't know what to expect. I'm just, so grateful that we've been spared to the extent we're being spared, but it's heartbreaking to think about the Keys and to think about half of the state is going to be affected. We're affected, but you know what I mean, directly with severely affected, I should say.
Yeah, who can imagine this track that is pretty much from the Everglades and Key West all the way up through Florida, and we have a hurricane warning for almost the entire state right now, and tornado watches for all of South Florida. It affects almost everyone, and it was just so weird earlier in the week to say, don't evacuate to the West Coast because you might get it there, and here we are, they are going to get it, and that's why we always tell people, try to shelter where you are. If you're in a good, well-built house and you're not in an evacuation area, stay there. Don't try to outrun the storm, especially this one, which was going to cover the entire state.
And by the way, no,
I was just going to say, but don't you think the 4 or 5 aspect to this, the category 4 and 5, I think that scared so many people. They really felt like they had to run from this, even if they had a good structure, a good home.
Yes.
They might have still been safe in.
Yes. Yeah, I think it was kind of a 1-2 punch with Harvey and seeing that
Harvey,
and the rainfall, and then seeing that 5, and not only a category 5, but a lot of chatter on social media about why isn't there a category 6, and we kind of dismiss it, but when your winds are 185 miles an hour, it kind of makes sense. When the category 5 starts at 157, that's a big jump to just kind of keep going. So this is a storm that was just very different, and is still very different too, because tonight, I think at 11 o'clock, we may notice those winds have bumped up again to a category 4. Just will not give up. It's just amazing.
And it's a good time to just remind people, we're mindful that many of you are listening to us now as power goes out in many spots across the region. That's going to continue. So again, ESPN FM 106.3, again, ESPN FM 106.3, streaming our coverage, WPTV.com, our WPTV Facebook page live right now. All different resources. We hope you're still able to be with us on air, but we're giving you as many different ways to be with us as possible.
And we're going to talk to FPNL. Actually, Brian Garner from FPNL, who used to be our bureau chief in Stewart, is going to be on the phone with us at 10:30. So I put on my Facebook page, if you have any power-related questions or if you have weather questions for these guys, these experts, send those as well. We'll get them answered for you.
And James, you certainly, your thoughts, you and Steve have been a tremendous duo, 1-2 punch, as viewers remind us often. And I know for you all, you're covering it as pros and meteorologists, but when you take that hat off, the human element for you, and I would ask Steve too, it's difficult for all of us, it's difficult for all of you at home when you kind of step away from the fact that we need to cover it as best we can. It's a tough blow for our state, and maybe one of the toughest in history.
Yeah, and for us, we have families too, we have houses, we have things to protect, but we also want to bring all that to you, so we have that in our back of our mind. Then, of course, coming here and doing all of this kind of stuff, and with a storm that has been unprecedented, and like Steve was saying, right after another storm that was unprecedented, it's got everybody on edge. This reminds me a little bit, but not a lot, but a little bit of Hurricane Floyd, where it was so big and so powerful out there, everybody just said, I'm out of here. And that clogged all the roads. Remember, it was the biggest mass evacuation of the state, and it didn't really work out. Of course, we figured some stuff out by then, but people were just scared because it was so powerful when it was time to leave. Of course, it didn't hit in Florida, but just having that fear there of saying, hey, I need to get the heck out of here. And then this one, there's nowhere to go. It's moving from south to north, so everybody was confused. Do I go to Orlando? Do I go to Tampa? Well, now we know that obviously the West Coast was a bad idea, and even Orlando, too, like Charlie was. What was it, Steve? 108 mile per hour wind at Orlando
I think, at the airport that night. And everyone had evacuated from Tampa in Charlie, because Charlie was supposed to go to Tampa. And they all stayed in hotel rooms and spent $200 a night riding through the middle of a hurricane, which was Charlie, Friday the 13th.
And this ominous note that we've all waited and known was going to happen over the last few days, at least, as the track solidified. Kelly, it gives you chills reading it, because you know what's to come. The National Weather Service saying the first hurricane force wind gusts has been recorded in the Florida Keys. Steve, Kelly, I just sometimes you run out of words when you think of what's coming.
What will the Keys look like after this?
Ooh, this is going to be a big, big hit, and the storm surge and the eye is very close to Key West. I suspect the eye will actually cross just to the east. That's the current track, but just by a few miles. And usually when we're watching the eye, the area that has the most potential to get the damage is that, in this case, that right eye wall or the northeast eye wall of the storm. Actually, I think I can bring it up here and kind of show you. Anyway, it looks like it'll track very close to Key West, but Key West may just miss the real brunt of the storm. But Kelly, the other thing that I'm worried about is the storm surge, because this one is enormous, because it's so big, and that fetch off the water, that persistent massive wind is just piling that water up against all the keys. It's not just the lower keys or the middle keys. All the keys are going to get a storm surge. And I drove down, and I told this story earlier about after Hurricane George going down to the state park down there that I love, and it wasn't destroyed, but it took a huge hit. The roads were all washed out. In fact, I think there's actually a display and exhibit after Hurricane George because of that, and they showed the before and after pictures, and that wasn't a significant hurricane.
I think that was 97 or 8. I was down covering that. I think it was a 2. And I remember the surge coming in, and when we were in a building, and you see it coming in, and it came in fast in a 2.
Yeah, this storm, you can't. There's no way you can compare the two.
No,
this storm is completely different, much stronger, much larger, and it's going to have much more of an impact on the Keys. And then eventually, it's up toward Fort Myers and Naples after that, which will be an interesting scenario, because it's not. I don't think it's their worst case scenario because the eye is so close to the coast, but it is pretty close to a worst case scenario for those areas tomorrow.
Indeed it is, and 11 o'clock we'll get the latest advisory, but it seems pretty baked in now, Steve, on the track.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, and does it fluctuate much at this point with it being that close? And what can we expect from just the movement of the storm?
Yeah, at this point, we're just watching the radar's our best tool, and we can watch these bands come in and keep an eye on any kind of spins and any kind of damaging winds, and keep an eye on the center of the storm and watch it as it moves up toward the Keys. And I think we'll see some wobbles in the track, but the long-term track over each 6-hour period is going to be pretty consistent. And think about it now, we've had almost 2 days of computer runs that are pretty much up the west coast of Florida after the lower Keys. So the chances of any big shift, very unlikely at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we wait, and again, we're going to have FPL at 10:30, and again, we're going to update on power outages. We hope all of you have sheltered in place and are there for the next, really, 48 hours, 36 to 48 hours at least, before you get the all clear. Again, we come back, 6 million people were ordered or asked to evacuate Florida. That's a historic evacuation.
Yeah, I think in Floyd it was 3 million, and that was a record back in '99 for Floyd.
So going over the next 24, 48 hours, when will it get to the point where it's just consistent for us? You know, band after band, rain after rain, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we're almost at that point now, but definitely overnight. We're going to get into this situation where it's pretty persistent rain, and all of our winds are constant 35 to 40 miles an hour, and then as the bands come in, the feeder bands, they'll bump those 40-mile-an-hour winds up to 50 and maybe 60. And I'm hoping that we stay under that hurricane force wind gust along the coastline. I'm kind of cautiously optimistic. I was very concerned earlier when we had that 70-mile-an-hour wind at the Lauderdale airport. You know, this is a little too early for wind speed that high, and all the other anemometers around it were measuring about 40 to 50. So that was, and then that ended up being a tornado warning. Actually, that storm cell as it came through. I think around 5 o'clock this afternoon, and there's the one that we're watching at this point. Now, think about it. About 10 minutes ago, this was coming in across Boca and Del Rey, and now it's moving over our radar at Lantana. That's how fast this stuff is moving. And now it's into Wellington, driving into Wellington, and eventually Royal Palm and Loxahatchee and the acreage. in the next couple of minutes. So right down Southern Boulevard, and look at all the training range all the way back in toward Palm Beach and Lake Worth and Green Acres and Lake Clark Shores. So there's another band, and notice how everything's kind of filled in now. This is just persistent, moderate, and heavy rain, and then you get the torrential tropical rains that come in with the feeder bands. So this weather pattern pushes north all through the Treasure Coast tonight, and by morning, it is just kind of nonstop, off and on, heavy rainfall.
Well, we'd also like, it's a good chance to remind our viewers, and we'd like to, our producers, keep feeding us, send us your Facebook questions so we can get them to our experts, our expert meteorologist here. We're also, if you have questions specific to power concerns, FPL's going to join us at 10:30, but Steve and James certainly here. One thing that's good in terms of being able to communicate with you at home is in 04 and 05, social media was in its infancy, and now we really have a chance to have a real two-way conversation for you. So we welcome that chance, talking to our producers to bring us as many questions as you have. We're doing our best to answer them on air, online, whether you're listening to us on radio, and let Steve and James or Kelly or whomever, FPL, answer the questions. We'll do the best we can with our team is here. So we want to make sure, to the degree we can, through a long night and day to come, that it's a two-way conversation.
That reminds me of Francis. The social media back then was we would put out our email address, and then we would get 500 emails, and we would have the stack of paper, and we would flip through each question. It was kind of funny to watch because I would say, okay, email me at SWeagle, and then we'd go over to the Outlook program, and it would just spin. I mean, I think it was like heating up the computer because it couldn't handle all the questions that were coming in. And now it's just Twitter and Facebook and everything else. So yeah, it has changed in a big way.
And we'll bring those into you shortly. We're waiting upcoming for this. You know, the governor talked about, you put an emergency management structure in place, but they talked about 75,000 people had taken shelter, but they asked 6 million people to get out of harm's way. And one of the great challenges we're going to face when this storm has passed, again, if you took just the sliver of the storm that's going to affect the Palm Beaches and Treasure Coast, from Boca Raton to Sebastian Inlet out in Okeechobee County, you could handle that relatively quickly. We're worried about tornadoes, power outages, but you could surge in your team, and they'll probably be able to deal with that relatively quickly. But when you think of the logistics of all the people are going to want to get home, continued gas disruptions, supply disruptions, leaders of the state having to figure out how to deploy resources to a ravaged area, the patience that's going to be tested not only here, but throughout the state, I think is something that all of us are going to be learning some real lessons in the next few weeks, and have to find new reservoirs of patience and outreach. I really do.
Without a doubt.
We learn things from every hurricane that comes through, and those are why the hurricane conferences happen every year. The guys who go through the storms are the ones who are the speakers the next year, and they tell their best practices, what worked, what didn't work, and we improve the next time.
Do you think, has the Hurricane Center been correct on this from the beginning?
They've done an excellent job with this one, and there were a couple of times where they could have gone in other directions, and they stuck with it. There was one time, and they actually mentioned it in a discussion in a roundabout way, that they regretted flip-flopping, that windshield wiper effect.
Right.
And they jumped too soon on one of the directions. That was actually coming into Florida, but they quickly corrected that, and now we have our storm coming in the West Coast.
And Steve, stay with us. We're going to loop you into the conversation we've got upcoming right now.
That's right. Brian Garner is joining us from Florida Power and Light, and Brian is a good friend of ours and a longtime News Channel 5 employee. He was our bureau chief reporter up in Stewart. And Brian, we hope you're doing well and your beautiful family, and thanks for joining us tonight.
This brings back memories, doesn't it, Kelly?
Yes,
Good to see you both.
We have a history. Yes, we do.
Brian, give us first the overall assessment of what you're beginning to see in terms of power disruptions, the disposition of your resources. You know the question as both a reporter and now FPL. My power's out. What should I expect in the days to come? Give us the big view first.
Sure. I think at this point you all have been advising your viewers well, which is you've made your preparations, you've made your decisions, now just hunker down and be safe and stay inside and listen to the changing forecast, because it is changing every few hours. At the moment, if you look at the counties that you serve, very few power outages right now, just a few hundred, I'd say, in the Treasure Coast Palm Beach County, we're looking at about 9,500 people are out of power right now. But we are continuing to restore power even as the storm is hitting us, so long as the winds don't exceed 35 miles an hour. And as you said, even emergency crews, police, and fire, they can't be out on the road doing work under those conditions. So as long as the winds stay below sustained winds of 35 miles an hour, we're going to be out there restoring power even during this storm. And then afterwards, we've got a virtual army of folks coming in from all over the country. More than 16,000 people from 30 different states, including Canada, have descended on Florida to help in this restoration effort, both here in Palm Beach County and the Treasure Coast. And then, as you've seen, the West Coast is really going to take the brunt of this storm. So we're going to be putting the full force of our resources into restoring power. And it could be a long haul, especially in the West Coast, but we're not going to stop until everybody is restored.
Brian, let's talk about the information you want from FPL customers. We had a question. Someone sent it in and said that there was a tree in the backyard that was rubbing up against a power line and the line was sparking. Obviously, that's somebody who needs to call you, correct?
As we see, by the way, power workers coming in and being greeted here. I believe that's the images we're seeing of workers from around the country coming in, I think.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'll answer your question. If what you're seeing there is, that's our president and CEO, Eric Szilagyi. He's greeting workers that are coming in from California, actually. We've got a relationship with utilities from all over the country, and these men and women flew in from California to PBIA yesterday. We're outfitting them with some of our trucks and equipment so they can hit the ground running. And we're staging these crews all over the state in the places that we expect to be hardest hit by the storm so that to speed the restoration. We're getting these people on the ground even before the storm hits us. To your question about the power line against a tree, we do want to hear about this. Now, even though we have a smart grid that gives us visibility all across the state as to who's out of power, who has power, and helps us actually restore outages remotely in many cases, it does help to have that kind of eyes on the ground feedback from our customers. A good way to do this is the FPL mobile app. If you download that either on Google Play or in the App Store, you can report outages and get the status of your outages throughout this event. So it's very helpful. Also on FPL.com/storm.
And Brian, when you talk about 16,000 people coming in from around the country, it is a mammoth response, and yet the storm is so mammoth, you wonder, many people say, is even that going to be enough? Is it going to test FPL? In fact, it is going to test FPL and other utilities in a way that you've never been tested before, which is saying a lot, given the efforts you've had to make in storms, including Andrew 25 years ago. So the question is, will it, in fact, be enough? What other resources will you draw on? Eric Szilagyi, your president, said we may have 9 million people, potentially, who could be without power. That'd be nearly 1 out of 2 Floridians. Where do you get the extra resources if you need thousands more?
You're right, Michael. This is actually the largest restoration force ever assembled for a storm. And you've heard this storm is a historic storm, so we are trying to match our resources to the kind of weather and challenges that we're going to be facing here. Millions of people will be out of power as a result of this storm. And even though we've put considerable efforts into strengthening our grid, no grid can be hurricane-proof. There's going to be damage. There's going to be people out of power. We ask for your patience, and we want to make sure that, we're committed to restoring power, no matter how long it takes.
Would you expect, given the level of damage your simulations suggest in the Palm Beaches and Treasure Coast, that in a relative sense, you're talking many days or on into, given the strain you'll feel in other parts of the state, perhaps on into weeks or a couple of weeks, just as a broad idea for people?
Sure. Now, until we actually get visibility on the damage once the storm passes, we won't have specific estimates, and we will have that within 24 hours after the storm. We'll have specific estimates. But broadly speaking, about a day or two ago, we were looking at a much harder East Coast storm. And had that been the case, it could have been a very, very long rebuilding effort of the grid. Now it really looks like the West Coast will be facing the brunt of this storm. So on the West Coast, we could be looking at a rebuilding of the grid, which, yes, could take weeks rather than days. On the East Coast, it's more like a restoration effort, which is more like a matter of days. So that's broadly speaking, but again, we won't know specifics until the storm actually passes and we see what we're dealing with.
We were just looking at that video of all of the other crews coming in. Where are you putting all those people? Where is that?
It's a good
All
question.
those
It's
trucks.
an army. Where do you put them all? What you're looking at in that video there, that's in Lake City up in the northern part of the state. So as these trucks flow in from different states, we have a big, what we call processing center there in Columbia City Fairgrounds, I believe it is. And so they're all staging there. They're learning about safety protocols, how to do their job here in Florida as opposed to the states that they're from. And then we're going to deploy them. And we're already moving some of those resources. We have another big processing center at the Daytona Speedway, hundreds and hundreds of trucks there. And we're slowly moving them as we can deeper into the state. In Orlando, we're going to be moving some farther south into the Tri-County area as we can. And the purpose of that is to get them as close to the damage as possible. We're also going to have more than 20 what we call staging sites. These are big sort of tented villages, if you will, with equipment and trucks, and each one can operate independently as its own restoration center, if you will, to be able to deploy the trucks in the areas hardest hit.
I was going to ask you if when the storm flip-flopped and went from East Coast to West Coast, if that had affected your staging. But I guess in Lake City, Daytona, I mean, you guys already had that kind of mapped out and already underway.
Yeah, but you're right. We had to adjust just as everyone else has had to adjust with the storm. So we are changing our plans by the hour. And here at the FPL Command Center, where I am right now in Riviera Beach, our management are making those decisions each hour as the storm shifts. So we're deploying resources, and we're able to change very quickly just as the storm changes.
Ryan, two things. One, give the safety advice. I know you all worry greatly for your customers after the storm. Power lines are down. Unfortunately, we hear stories of people going near lines they thought that were dead that are not. So run through your basic checklist that you want to remind all of your customers throughout your 35-county viewing area about so that they stay safe with all the down lines we're going to see in the coming hours and days.
Absolutely. Safety is top priority for us, and we hope it is for everyone, too. After a storm, and you've been giving this advice too, Michael and Kelly, do not wade into flood waters. You don't know what's in those flood waters, and especially it could be a power line. That could be an energized power line. So stay clear of power lines, stay clear of flood waters. For those of your customers or those of your viewers who are using generators, don't use them in the home or in your garage. Keep them far outside so the carbon monoxide is not an issue. Use them as directed on the instructions of your generator. We always see accidents from that. We hate to see that happen. And when it is safe to be on the roads, we also want you to be careful because there may be a lot of stoplights that are out, traffic lights rather, and you want to treat those as four-way stops if they are not working. We also don't want to see any accidents on the roads. I know after the storm, a lot of people will be taking down shutters. They'll have ladders and so forth. Again, be wary of power lines. You want to stay clear of those at all times.
And resist the temptation to get out that chainsaw with your buddies and say, hey, there's a tree limb down on the power line, because people say, I'm going to help out, but you can really get hurt. You need to stay well clear, let the pros get in, assess it, bring in the extra help you need to do that. And that's the kind of help that gets somebody hurt. And I know that you encourage people stay away from all of that.
Absolutely. One of the great things about storms is people want to help each other, neighbors helping neighbors, and it's a great thing, but we don't need any heroes out there, especially when it comes to power lines. We've got our experts there, and we've got, as I mentioned, 16,000 people whose job it is to take care of those and make those repairs.
And when you're out of power for a week or so, and I'm not saying we're going to be in this part of Florida, but I just remember from past stores, man, there's nothing like that caravan of power companies coming down the highway.
When they come into the neighborhoods, and you're going to see this at home, they literally will get applause. They're like the liberators, liberating you from the tyranny of no AC, all the modern things we take for granted, and suddenly when they roll through and restore you to modern life, there's no feeling quite like it. Kelly, you brought up a great point the other day. In the old days, before smart technology, people say, well, they might miss me. My little block's too small, or my weatherhead's broken, and they just went on by me. Brian, what do you say to people? Obviously, they can help report, but is the technology sophisticated enough that you can get right down to the block or home and say to somebody, hey, you're not going to be left because you were on the cul-de-sac that we sort of rolled by? Not suggesting you would do that, but give people a sense of that.
Yeah, it's really, the technology has really changed since the big 2004 and 5 storms that the people who have lived here for a while remember. What's really changed is back then, we really didn't know if you were out of power until you called us, which is kind of hard to believe. But today, it is an entirely different ballgame. With smart grid technology, every home and business has a smart meter. There's smart equipment on the poles and wires, and all of that equipment talks to one another, and it talks to us. So in our command centers, we can see if you're out of power. When we send a restoration crew out to your neighborhood, let's say we restore power at your home, before that crew leaves that neighborhood, they'll look at an iPad and be able to determine if all your neighbors are on or off, and they won't leave that neighborhood until everybody's restored. So that just greater visibility across the grid, and that should help speed restoration on the back end of this event, which we think will be a great service to everybody.
By the way, is the St. Lucie nuclear plant being secured as the winds get higher, and will that be something you can pick up the slack easily until you bring it back up to speed post-storm?
Yeah, actually, because this storm has shifted and it's more of a West Coast event, we are not going to take the St. Lucie nuclear power plant offline. That was under consideration at one point, but because of the shifting storm, we are not going to do that. We have taken one of our 2 nuclear units at Turkey Point in Miami offline, and the other is still under consideration based on the path and intensity of the storm. So, again, as the storm shifts, some of our decisions about power generation are shifting as well. But we do want our customers to know, regardless of whether the nuclear plant in Miami is completely offline or online, we do have other sources of generation. We do have adequate power that we will continue to operate the grid until, again, the storm prevents us from doing so.
All right. As we take a look at North Hutchinson Island, we're going to get back to some of that coverage. Brian, first of all, we want to thank you. And I just have to ask, because I've always wondered this, is it really true if you're near a school or a hospital, you're going to get your power back on before someone else?
Well, you know, our restoration process, we go to the power generation first so we can get the power back on. We go to our critical customers, the hospitals, 911 centers, police and fire, and then it's the biggest blocks of customers as quickly as we can get them. So it may be, if you're served by a power line that's near one of those shelters or a police station, you may be one of the first to get your power back, but no guarantees if you're not part of that. We ask for your patience.
Absolutely. You have to have it after something like this.
Well, listen to all of the personnel who are pouring in from around the country, in addition to the thousands with FPL. We know you train for this. It's a disaster recovery unlike any, perhaps in history, at least certainly for the Sunshine State. So you all be safe out there. And we thank you very much for your time. I know we'll be in touch in the days to come, but it's going to be a long haul.
Thanks for your time.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. All right, real quick, I want to read this because we just got it. Boynton Beach police say that conditions have gotten so bad in Boynton, they've pulled all of their police officers off the road for their safety, and they're urging people who live in Boynton Beach, if you have a true emergency, call 911.
Yeah, and that was right when that feeder band moved through.
You guys were showing us.
Yeah, it's moved up into West Palm and now North Palm Riviera Beach too. And PBIA, just like that, picked up 46-mile-per-hour wind gusts. I just went outside to the balcony to check it out, and the rain is just blowing sideways out there. I mean, there's still some lulls at times, but it has definitely picked up from when I was out there just a couple of hours ago.
So it has begun.
And the feeder bands will become more rapid in terms of more intense for a while, and in their duration, and also the frequency of them rolling through.
Right, the breaks in between, we won't have as many of them, and then it'll just be a steady blowing, and that's all going to happen. That's all going to go downhill tomorrow.
Okay.
So this is just the beginning, really. I know it's intense now, but by tomorrow this time, it's going to be a whole different story. It would have made landfall or making landfall on the West Coast. Things will pick up rapidly here.
So,
in terms of the increased intensity.
Yes, for sure.
And the duration, again, is because this thing has slowed down so much, it seems like there's some good thunder here in West Palm.
Yes.
But,
I saw the lightning out there.
So the duration, so what, we got 2 days of this, or?
Yeah, I think by, you waking up Monday morning, it's going to still be maybe a little bit intense, especially the Treasure Coast, but things will be winding down. You'll be able to feel like, okay, things aren't quite as bad as it was. And I think by Monday afternoon and evening, just before sunset, that'll be it. we can continue and just start cleaning up around here.
Well, speaking of your point about winds and about the impact and about first responders being out there, but also having to protect themselves, Major Mike Johnson with the Boynton Beach Police Department joins us via phone. Update us on the bulletin we just talked about. Give us the assessment of what's going on and how you're positioning, and it'll be ready to move in after the storm breaks.
Sure. Well, the conditions are really deteriorating rapidly. Right now, the visibility is extremely poor. Sometimes it's literally zero visibility. There's a lot of whiteout conditions. The wind gusts are extremely strong. As a matter of fact, they were rocking some of the patrol cars back and forth. We've got some power lines down. We've also got sections of the city that have no power whatsoever. Large trees down. The flying debris is getting to be very dangerous. And fortunately, most people have heeded the warning and they're not out on the road. So right now, it really is only the first responders. And because of that, I think it's time to start putting their safety as another primary concern and bring them in, unless it's absolutely necessary.
I know this may seem like a very obvious question, but I think it's worth spelling out for people. In the tweet that you all put out, it said, please only call 911 if you have a true emergency. So define a true emergency.
Well, that would have to be something that would be life-threatening. For example, if someone was having a heart attack, the fire department and the police department are going to try and respond to that. But the problem is we may not be able to actually get there. Like I said, there's some very large trees down blocking entire roads, and there's standing water in parking lots, and there's also some of the travel lanes are completely flooded already. So we may not actually be able to even arrive at that call.
What are the signals for you that will give you the all clear, and how have you pre-positioned assets to perhaps be able to get through streets where there'll be high water? What do you have ready post-storm, and what can you say to the residents of Boynton Beach about what you'll be doing, how you'll be patrolling, what additional resources, perhaps high water vehicles if you need them, and the like that you'll have to protect the community, property, and the like?
Well, with the fire vehicles and some of our high water vehicles, those are positioned around the city based on the different fire stations and also the locations that we're housing our people. So we have pretty much every section of the city is well covered with pre-positioned assets. And as soon as the storm winds drop down to where it's actually safe to be traveling about, well, we'll be doing a damage assessment and trying to respond to as many of those emergency calls as possible, and also checking up on people. We're going to be doing a lot of welfare checks in the aftermath of this storm just to make sure everybody's okay.
Major, any final thoughts for the people of Boynton Beach?
No, I would just say your first responders in the city are out there to protect you, and we will do that the best we can during the storm and after the storm.
We appreciate you all being on the front lines, and take care of yourselves. We know the communities across our region counting on you to protect them, and so we appreciate it. Be safe out there.
Thank you, and thank you for getting the message out.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And I'm sure if that's the situation in Boynton Beach, Delray Beach, Boca Raton, Lake Worth, I mean, you just kind of can go up through certainly Palm Beach County, and we've already seen the extremely rough weather on the Treasure Coast. I think a lot of other agencies are going to be doing the same thing.
And every department has talked about, you hear us talking about this Alpha Bravo. They're going to go 12 on, 12 on, or 12 on, 12 off. So they're going to mass all their resources. But right now, in order to work effectively after the storm, they have to protect themselves during the storms. And you heard FPL talk. In their case, they have crews out. When the winds hit 35 miles an hour, they pull them back so that after the storm, they can safely get back out there with their crews unharmed and get to work. So you're going to see a lot of people out there. But right now, all of us just need to be indoors for the rest of the weekend.
Well, and it was interesting, the Major, and Steve's getting back in the studio. We'll get him up here and get an update for you. But already saying that there were some, Steve, I don't know if you heard the interview with Major Mike Johnson from Boynton Beach, but already saying there were some major trees that were down and some roads, some power lines down, that sort of thing. Whiteout conditions.
Any location?
He didn't give a specific on the trees.
But our viewing area?
The Boynton Beach. And he said we have people positioned elsewhere. So it's starting to become pretty intense all over the city.
Well, that's one of two reasons. The tornado warning that we had earlier around Lantana, that line of storms, I had some reports of down power lines and even a cell tower around Lantana and 441 that was sparking, I guess. And now we have this second line that just worked into Boca and Delray that is now up around the Gardens area, and it's on Live Viper 5 Max. Our winds are picking up now. They're all pretty much strong tropical storm force. Actually, I'll get in the and kind of run through some neighborhoods here and show you what's going on with the storm at this point. We're going to get a new advisory from the Hurricane Center coming out in the next few minutes, but look at this line that is coming in now around North County. This is a solid feeder band that's working from West Palm, and we heard rumbles of thunder around in the last few minutes. Now it's coming in across the gardens. We have that second line that's been popping up with occasional tornado warnings. They're none in effect right now, but definitely each one of these little cells has a chance of firing up a little bit of rainfall. So Vero, you notice the winds there were about almost 40 miles an hour. Look at all the 40 to almost 50 mile an hour winds that are starting to pop up. Lauderdale 48, 48 around Pompano, 47 at Oakland Park. And the winds earlier actually in Lauderdale were up around 60 and 70. And there's that big band as it pushes to the north and very quickly into Jupiter and the Gardens. That's a solid area of gusty winds. And this is an area that can bring down some power lines, put out some power outages too. There's a little bit of lightning with this one, but it's not quite into, it's up around, I guess, Donald Ross at this point, just arriving there, and it'll be into Indiantown Roads to Jupiter Farms, Palm Beach Country Estates. There's the B line there, and look at how far it just worked through the acreage and Loxahatchee. And that's what we've been kind of describing. And if you've been through the hurricanes in the past, these waves of heavy rainfall and strong gusty winds work through, and then it tapers off, and you just kind of get this moderate and to persistent heavy rain in behind that. A little farther south, Lauderdale now at about 48 mile an hour wind, and 40s all over the place actually, popping up around Broward County. And there's a look at South Delray and Highland Beach. So rain's almost tapering off. That'll be short-lived though, through Boca. And there's another little storm cell that's coming in around Port St. Lucie. And this has been that line all evening that has fired up, probably 4 or 5 tornado warnings. There's a closer look at it. So Vero, and there's 60 all the way down through Lakewood Park, Fort Pierce. And there's the heaviest rain at this point right there, and a few more off the coastline that we're keeping an eye on. And obviously the wider view has that big band that's coming in now to northern Palm Beach County. And so that'll track from, it's almost into Jupiter. So if you're in Jupiter and it's a little persistent rain, give it another 5 or 10 minutes, and then eventually pushes up through Jupiter to Cuesta, Jupiter Farms. And look at how far it stretches all the way back now into Belglade. That's how enormous this is. And then all the way off the coastline back in toward the Bahamas too. So there's one band, there's a second band there, and it's all part of that big weather maker to the south. And our current winds, you can see, are almost 50 miles an hour. And there's the wide view with the hurricane eye way to the south and just spinning up there. And look at how enormous this is. So this is a couple hundred miles away, and we have massive feeder bands all the way up through the Treasure Coast and even now farther north up into the Space Coast too. So look at Lauderdale and that area just to the south, and you can see some winds picking up. So they're down to the south. They have almost 50 mile an hour winds. Well, Miami's now at 38. The winds will fluctuate back and forth. They've been doing it all afternoon and evening. And the core of the hurricane, even Bahamas, 30, 40 mile an hour winds as this thing swings through. But it's so well defined, and just it's one wave of rain after another coming in. But we earlier in the evening, we were watching for rotation and damaging winds. That has settled down a little bit. Be a little bit concerned about that line right there, though, because that has some gusty, potentially damaging winds, although James was out a little bit earlier and he was in it, and it didn't seem too bad, but definitely those are the areas that we're keeping an eye on through the evening and overnight hours. We're actually going to get a new update coming in from the Hurricane Center very shortly with a new track and a new wind speed, and we'll get an idea if the direction and the track is shifted at all for the next 4 or 5 days.
We'll let you get to that in a minute, Steve, but I just want to ask, I had 2 questions handed to us from a Facebook friend, and we kind of addressed these a little earlier, but worth repeating. With the slow movement of the storm, will the path change at all?
Unlikely at this point, and for 2 reasons. The computer models are so lined up right down the western side of the state, and our hurricane now is just a couple hundred miles away to the south, so it's on our doorstep at this point. And the third, it started to make that turn. And that was the key moment, and we talked about that earlier in the week, that we wouldn't know for sure until it made that turn. Well, that turn has started, and It's headed to Key West overnight. Looks like the Key West landfall or close to it, maybe 2 to 3 in the morning.
And you're up, and the update at 11, the latest computer runs will continue to verify what Steve's been talking about.
Yeah, well, those runs have come in for most of the evening.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's right, because they've been updating them more frequently.
Yes, and then the European model will come in between about 2 and 3 overnight, usually 2 a.m. It's kind of a painful process where you get one slide after another for about 45 minutes, but eventually you see where that model is taking this hurricane, and I don't think it's going to, there's no reason for it to change.
And Steve, we look at that. Kelly and I were just looking with our jaws agape. This storm already covers basically roughly a third to a half of the state, and it's not even fully upon us.
I don't remember a hurricane where we had hurricane warning for, I think, almost the entire state. I don't think there's a warning all the way over to Pensacola, but it's almost there.
Yeah.
It's really surreal. Yeah. Everything about this storm has been surreal. The way that people evacuated so early, the gas issues, lack of gas, and the supplies off store shelves disappearing a week in advance, and shutters going up days before the hurricane watch is issued. I kind of doubt that we're going to see a storm like this in the future either. There's so many odd things that happen.
Let's hope we don't.
Your lips to God's ears on that.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you, Steve.
Absolutely. And we'll let you get over there and get all that information with the new update that's coming in. You know, we were just talking about nothing being normal with all of this, and I bet you've probably lost track of what day it was. I had to think today, oh, it's Saturday. That's right, it's football Saturday. Well, it's not your typical Saturday night in Hobe Sound. US 1 was basically deserted, and our Amy Littman took to that area to give us a look.
I'm here along US 1 in Hobe Sound right now, where you can see it's pretty quiet. There are not too many cars along US 1 right now, especially compared to earlier today when there were quite a few cars still out on the road. There was a long line of cars at the McDonald's drive-thru, as well as the drive-thru at this Dunkin' Donuts right here across the street. But now I have only seen a few passing cars, so people seem to mostly be staying inside at this point. Reporting in Hobe Sound, Amy Littman, WPTV News Channel 5.
And of course, we have crews on the southwest Florida coast, Stephanie Susskind, Fort Myers, Chris Stewart, and Tampa. We're efforting reports from them as well. And remember, if your power is out, and I say if, for a lot of you, you're listening to us, please continue to do so. WPTV.com, our Facebook Live page at WPTV, and ESPN FM 106.3, all additional outlets, so we can stay in touch with you and you with us over the coming days.
We'll be back in just a moment. As Irma makes its way toward Florida, we have seen impacts from the storm already.
Power outages, the whipping rain, the wind intensifying here, and a lot more to come.
That's right. And tornado warnings, etc. It's been a busy night already. And Storm Team 5 Chief Meteorologist Steve Weagle with the very latest that's just come in on Irma's track.
Yes, a new track has just come out. We don't have any tornado warnings. We have a tornado watch, though, at this point for Palm Beach County south and toward Miami. Here's a look at the storm tonight. Really hasn't intensified much. Looks incredible on the satellite loop. There's that eye as it emerges off the north coast of Cuba. You'll notice in the last couple of hours this little weird wobble. The Hurricane Center they just ignore that for good reason. They look at long-term trends over about 4 to 6 hours, and that trend is now a track toward Key West. This is an amazing hurricane that has massive rain bands that stretch out hundreds of miles, working some heavy rainfall now in toward Jupiter from the Gardens and also on the Treasure Coast, Vero getting nonstop. Really strong thunderstorms and several tornado warnings. Even down around Fort Pierce in the last hour, we had a tornado warning because of that. And the storm tonight, just off that north coast of Cuba and slowly moving away. Now, let's take a cross section of this and show you what's been going on during the evening. The cold cloud tops the top of the hurricane, about 50 to 60,000 feet up in the atmosphere off the ocean surface. This is an enormous storm with this inner core stretching out about 50 to 70 miles. The hurricane force winds out 70 miles, and the tropical storm force winds, for all intents and purposes, are out about 200 miles on each side. And just this enormous structure with some of the heaviest rain and the strongest winds right along that eye wall, which is, of course, circulating around that center. And here's inside the eye, and we've always seen the hurricane hunters fly through, and they break through that eye wall, and you get that stadium effect. This is it with the storm, and that eye is about 25, 30 miles wide. It's been fluctuating back and forth. There's another look at it as it spins off, so it's moving off the north coast of Cuba and away, and the radar shows still just a perfectly symmetrical storm with not a lot of dry air anywhere near the center of it. Well-protected hurricane with some incredibly strong winds. And our heaviest rain at this point is coming in across Jupiter and working its way up into Martin County. Okay, the latest track, Category 3, the winds at 120, moving northwest now. That's new at 6 miles an hour. It's going to make landfall close to or right over Key West. There's 8 in the morning. So it's crossing over the lower Keys, and then it's just off the coast of Fort Myers as we get into the mid-morning at, well, this is Sunday evening, actually, at 8 p.m. It's off Fort Myers, and then it works up toward Tampa. There's Monday morning at 8 a.m. It's now starting to pull away, and we're starting to really see a dramatic difference in our weather here, and then it tracks as a big rainmaker and eventually a tropical depression all the way up in toward Kentucky and Tennessee. Now, computer model tracks also bringing this storm. There's a little bit of sway back and forth. There's the look at the GFS model. That's the teal color model, and they kind of wander back and forth, but they're pretty much along the coast and not much of a change expected from what was around earlier. And these models have been updating through the evening, and the new European model will update between about 2 and 3 in the morning. So no big surprises there. There is a tornado watch in effect for Palm Beach County and south into South Florida, and we certainly had our share of tornado warnings during the evening. We have a flood watch in effect for essentially the entire viewing area all the way down into Miami. And we also are looking at some very strong winds developing overnight and into Sunday. We've already had some pretty significant wind gusts, and this is the European model. As I said, this is going to update about 3 hours from now, and it has a hurricane very close to Key West early morning and forecasting 111 mile an hour winds at that point, crossing over the area. I don't know if you noticed there, but those Key West winds drop down a little bit. So the European model takes pretty much the eye right over Key West. And there's a look at Fort Myers. This is just one computer model. This isn't the official forecast, but look at the wind speeds that it's forecasting, 144 miles an hour on the right side of the track. And here in our area, we have strong tropical storm force winds, and some of those gusts could approach hurricane strength across the coastline. as the bands work in. It's certainly possible. You can't argue it, because even a few hours ago we had a 70-mile-an-hour wind at the Lauderdale Airport, and we've seen numerous reports of 50 and even 55 miles an hour this evening already, and the storm's not really all that close to us yet. It's just so massive. And there's a look at Monday afternoon as the winds shift around to the southwest. We get some drier air in. We still have 40, 50-mile-an-hour winds even at that point. Storm surge threat is on the southwest coast, Fort Myers, Naples, and this will be later in the day because the eye has to get north before those winds swing around and push all that water in towards southwest Florida. Here in our area, storm surge threat about 1 to 2 feet. The times of arrival, well, we're already seeing persistent tropical storm winds develop, but the peak for the winds with the new track is looking, there's 1:30 in the afternoon on Sunday, so we get this big swath of very strong winds coming in. Then Sunday evening, that's interesting. We actually see this improve a little faster than we saw earlier. And Monday at 3 a.m., we are looking at still persistent tropical storm force winds, but any kind of tornado threat pretty much diminishes on the backside of this, and so does the risk for flooding rains and any kind of severe weather at that point is starting to work away. We have seen some sporadic power outages. We still have that threat. We're looking at a medium to high range for southern Palm Beach County and also down around Broward County, and a little bit less as you get up into the Treasure Coast. Again, Vero and Sebastian looking at some higher numbers there. Here's a closer look. So this is through, well, this is about this time period into the early morning hours. But as more strong winds develop overnight, those numbers will continue to go up. Fort Myers, 100% chance of tropical storm force winds, 99 for Tampa. We're looking at a pretty good chance ourselves. In fact, we've already seen some. And for hurricane force winds, these numbers are almost nothing now at the coast, and you can see about 10 to 15% around the lake. That's nice. That's a very nice change, actually, around the lake. And then very high for Fort Myers and Tampa. Tampa's less only because the storm is farther south, farther away from Tampa. That, though, we're going to see that around 90%, I'm sure, with the next advisory coming out. It'll be at 5 a.m., the new forecast track. I want to remind everyone, we've had some kind of nasty weather. We've had several tornado warnings around the area, and we are looking at the center of the storm coming in Sunday. So this is the in-house Vipercast model. This is not the official forecast, but it matches up pretty closely. A large eye just off Naples, 1:30 in the afternoon. But I'm showing this for all this rainfall on the right side of the track that just swings in. This hurricane taps into that Gulf Stream warm water and just swings all that moisture in across our area through Sunday evening, and finally we get into some drier conditions getting into, well, there's midnight tomorrow night, so 25 hours from now, and a big change into Monday afternoon. So a lot going on with that. Let's say I haven't taken a look at these rainfall numbers in a couple of hours. Let's see if they have adjusted. Earlier we were thinking about 5 to 10 inches for total rainfall. Some spots are probably pretty close to 5 at this point with those training storms, and these numbers match up from what we saw earlier too, so no surprise there. Locally higher amounts are possible in some areas. So to summarize, still the rain's picking up, the feeder band's picking up overnight. We're still watching the radar for any kind of spin out there. We have Dave and James watching for those little couplets that are coming off the feeder bands offshore, and that trend will increase into Sunday and Sunday evening. And it looks at this point with the new models and the new forecast that we probably peak early to mid-evening with our weather, maybe late afternoon, and then it starts to improve slowly after that.
All right, Steve, thank you very much for the update. We appreciate it. Right now, there is some rain. It's been moving through parts of Clewiston. People there have been starting to arrive at shelters now for a couple hours.
And we go to our Michelle Casada live with more of what she's seeing there. Michelle.
Well, you know, the strong wind gusts and the heavy rain kind of comes and goes. We've had moments where we've seen that thick sheet of rain coming down at an angle and you can't even see much ahead of you, and then it calms down. Like right now, we're still seeing those wind gusts pick up, but the rain isn't so heavy right now. Just to give you an idea of where we are, we're in Clewiston at Clewiston High School, where they have opened up a shelter for people out here. And for people who are not familiar with the area, this is west of South Bay, west of western Palm Beach County. It's in the southwestern part of Lake Okeechobee Okeechobee. And we've seen many people come here tonight to this shelter, people who were coming from the west trying to evacuate their areas in Naples, Fort Myers, Bonita Springs, all of that. And they've come here to seek shelter. And really, we know the big story tonight has been and will be for the weekend, Hurricane Irma. But also there's another big story going on, and just it's about how people have been helping each other, being kind to one another. I read something on Facebook today about how Mother Nature at its worst is human nature at its best. So we have seen that here. We have seen people helping each other. And just to give you an example, I talked to a man a little while ago who arrived here shortly from Bonita Springs. He had run out of gas on the side of the road and had local police help him, and National Guard actually help him once he got here to load all his pets into the shelter. Them here at the shelter accepting people with pets. So it's just been a remarkable story. We'll hear from him now.
The Sheriff's Department here in Clewiston and the Police Department are just the nicest people in the world. And they brought me 2 gallons of gas.
To get you here?
Oh, yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. And I saw that too when you arrived. The National Guard was here helping you out.
Yep.
What did they say? What did they say they were doing here?
Well, they're just helping anybody out. The National Guard is all over the place. I guess the governor told them all to come out and assist. So that's kind of nice.
Just incredible to see people helping each other out. We also saw earlier a woman who came into the shelter. She didn't even know she was going to be here at the shelter, had her 2 dogs and her cats, and people here at the shelter helped her out and brought her crates for her dogs. She didn't have crates because she didn't know she was going to be at a shelter. So definitely seeing that really warms your heart to see people helping each other out. And as you can see, conditions are worsening. We do have someone coming in here to the shelter now that EMS has brought in, and so it's just people helping each other out, trying to get people to safety, trying to get people to shelter as the conditions worsen and we see these feeder bands get a little stronger and stronger. So hopefully we won't be seeing too much crazy weather out here. We do see that people are helping each other out. You see a man bringing in water for someone else. So it's just incredible to see how many people are coming together during the conditions worsening. And I know that being on the roads right now is probably a scary thing if people are still trying to come from the west to the east. But Clewiston High School obviously still open and people can come here and hunker down during the storm. We'll try to keep you updated from out here. For now, back to you.
All right, Michelle.
Yeah, good job, Michelle. Thank you very much. And nice to hear those wonderful stories. We've heard many of them, and we like to keep them coming.
A lot of us are going to have to step forward, and a lot of us will in the days and weeks to come for each other. Meanwhile, some viewer video coming in from North Hutchinson Island, taking a look at the weather there.
Exactly, and we heard from the sheriff earlier for that St. Lucie County briefing from the EOC, talking specifically about Hutchinson Island in general and being, of course, a barrier island. There were mandatory evacuations, and then St. Lucie County backed off on that and said they could be voluntary. But if you have already evacuated from Hutchinson Island, and now is no time to go anywhere, but they were going to position law enforcement at both ends of the island and make sure that the right people that actually live there were getting back onto the island. But the weather is severe right now on North Hutchinson Island. We want to thank this viewer for glimpsing out of a window of some sort and capturing some of it for us. You can see the lightning going off, and then of course we had the tornado warning just a short time ago in that vicinity up near Fort Pierce.
Well, and you raise an excellent point, Kelly, and we cannot emphasize it enough. Wherever you are now, shelter in place. You're creating a danger for yourself, a huge one to go out for the next 24 hours or so, certainly till you get the official all clear for your own safety, for the safety of others, for the safety of first responders. All of us need to shelter in place. It's going to be a long night, a long day, but we can at least give great thanks, as we know many of you are, that for all the headaches of the last week and all the, frankly, outright fear many of us had about a direct strike, we're going to be spared that. Tough few days ahead, but our hearts and help are going to really have to go out to Southwest Florida.
Exactly, which is what we're looking at right now. This is a live picture from Fort Myers, and this is where once everything changed and the track changed so dramatically and it became more of a West Coast storm than an East Coast storm, we sent some of our reporters over there this morning, and Stephanie Suskind was there and reports from the Fort Myers area.
We're right off McGregor Boulevard. It's a very popular neighborhood in Fort Myers, and it's also right on the Caloosahatchee River. So Saturday morning, this entire neighborhood became part of the mandatory evacuation zone. The fire department rode down the streets telling everyone that it was a mandatory evacuation and they needed to move to a safe place. Now, part of the reason for that evacuation is emergency crews will not be out during the storm. So if something happens in one of these evacuation zone areas, emergency crews will not be able to get to you. Now, Lee County officials say more than 30,000 people are now in their county shelters. We did speak to some people who chose not to evacuate. There's also people who sent us that video of the fire truck that said they weren't going to evacuate until the fire department came in and told them to leave. Reporting in Fort Myers, Stephanie Suskind, WPTV News Channel 5.
And that could be a life-altering decision, the great concern, or a life-ending one, and that's no hyperbole. The great concern, as Steve has been saying, as officials have said all the way to the governor, is about the tremendous storm surge that could happen in Fort Myers and Tampa Bay area, but particularly Fort Myers, that could cost people their lives. They have tremendous fear about that, and we're talking about a Category 4 storm, winds in excess of 130 miles an hour. It's going to be catastrophic. There's no doubt about that. And how many lives may be lost is uppermost on many minds, and a great concern. The governor talked about it tonight.
Oh, yeah, his tone was different.
Yeah.
It felt like in tonight's briefing, I really thought that it
He said of the storm surge, he said, how do you survive that? And
he said it like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, and it was a message of if you don't get away from it, you
Yeah.
could cost yourself your life. So when people say, well, I'm going to ride it out, and people say, well, I know what hurricanes are about. You don't know what this hurricane's about. I was in...
No one does.
Yeah, I covered Gilbert in '88 at Cat 5 in Mexico, and we didn't get quite the eye wall. And then Hugo the next year in a 100-year-old brick building, well built, the next morning was in rubble right next to where we sheltered. And believe me, it takes your breath away, I'll put it that way.
Already, and you've been hearing it and feeling it outside your own home, no doubt, the rain and wind, and of course that's going to lead to some power outages. We want to get an update on power. Let's go to Tanya Rogers. She's in the newsroom. Tanya?
Well, here's the latest, and we're showing you that in Palm Beach County, it's showing that over 22,000 customers are without power right now. St. Lucie, 120, and you can just see Okeechobee is at 80. And we'll go up one more time. Martin County, 208. Take a look at Miami-Dade County. Over 106,000 customers are without power. I want to show you some video that's been coming in. This one was posted by Joshua Williams here, saying that the first bad weather that we've seen in West Palm Beach, he's taken that right in his community. Also want to show you one of our former colleagues, Brian Enton, down in Miami. He got this video. Look at this. This is in the Miami area. He says this is along Miami Beach. And then he also took a picture here. He says trees and street lights down on Ocean Drive on Miami Beach after the major wind. So now we're starting to see some of the video and some of the pictures that are going to come in. I'm going to keep you updated and share them with you throughout the night. Back to you in the studio.
All right, Tanya, thank you very much.
We appreciate it. We want to let you know that right now you're watching us most likely on television, and if you do, or you are, count yourself lucky that you still have power. Some people don't, as Tanya just showed us. So we have you covered when the power goes out. Just make sure you're prepared. If you have a battery-operated radio, ESPN 106.3, we're simulcasting everything. Also online, if you have everything charged up, which would be a good idea if you haven't already, charge your tablets, your phones, etc., so that you do have some juice once the power goes out. But we are streaming on Facebook. We're also streaming on WPTV.com, and it's a good way that you can kind of keep up on what's happening as we go through the next 36 hours of all of this.
Radio, Facebook, all the tools at our disposal are at yours, and we will continue to ask you to send us in your questions Facebook so that Steve and James can answer them, or we can have the rest of our staff dig up the answers for you. It's nice to have a two-way conversation these days, and we can all help each other out. And We can hug you through the camera right now in a way that perhaps you couldn't. It doesn't hurt. A little helping hand and hug goes a long way right now.
Knowing someone's there during something like this is always a good thing.
Especially now.
Yeah. You know, we've felt so lucky. We bet you felt the same, like we've really dodged something major on this coast. We're still in for hurricane force winds. We're still in for tropical storm force winds. We're still in for a lot of nasty weather. However, the worst of it clearly is on the other coast. So we spoke to the mayor of Port St. Lucie not long ago about how they prepared, at the time, of course, thinking this was going to be the big one, and how they were ready to ride out the storm.
We were prepared early. The city, the residents did a great job of being ready, but now we've all been hunkered down for a while, and it's got a little bit more of a westerly track. Don't let your guard down. Let's not poke our head out too soon. Let's make sure that we stay hunkered down because now the weather's coming in.
So the mayor speaking some time ago about that. But, you know, Steve said something. It's going to once again, just as Andrew did, Andrew changed the whole calculus about building codes, which were shown to be horribly weak. And Miami-Dade County, parts of Miami-Dade County, much of it, they were changed. Debates about how you get people out, how you do a better job of that. This is going to rewrite the book in the coming years about emergency preparedness, about planning. It's going to renew the debate about how we keep piling in on our barrier islands. It's going to renew the debate about building codes. Just a week ago, you and I sat here doing a report. Well, they're talking about maybe we weaken them a little bit. Maybe we don't need them quite as strong, and blah, blah, blah. So all of that debate is going to be reshaped by this historically big catastrophic storm in ways that we have not even yet begun to imagine. And it's going to be billions of dollars. This will, Andrew was $25 billion disaster, the biggest until Katrina. This is going to, I'd be so surprised if this doesn't, by an order of magnitude, eclipse that. So the whole discussion in the state is going to change in the years to come.
Certainly feel as we head into what we know is ahead for the people over in the Tampa area, Fort Myers, the whole southwest coast. If you've ever been to Tampa, you've probably been to Ybor City.
Yep.
It's such a neat place.
So Florida.
Yep, it's so Florida, exactly. It is still open for people staying in the area, at least at one pub. And News Channel 5's Chris Stewart is there tonight.
Ybor City is one of the hot nightlife spots here in Tampa, and typically on a Saturday night it's packed on these streets, but with this hurricane coming, it's a different story. A lot of businesses are boarded up, but not this pub. Here, there's a little bit of fun the night before Irma.
We boarded up our house, got everything prepared, tied down all the lawn furniture and everything, got the provisions and things that we needed. But tonight, we're going to have a little bit of fun. There was a bunch of bands that were going to play tonight, of course, got canceled because of the storm. Kind of turned that into an acoustic show, and I'm just having a good time running sound for them tonight.
Show goes on?
Show's going on, yeah.
Well, after the bands wrap it up tonight, they're going to be closing down this pub. All the businesses really going to be closed in this neighborhood. This is a spot today for a lot of people who were evacuating from this storm. People thought that they would be coming here for it to be their safe space, but instead they're preparing to be in the path of this storm. But tonight they're just trying to enjoy themselves before what could be a very stressful time starting tomorrow. In Tampa, Chris Stewart, WPTV News Channel 5.
Chris will be there,
Yep.
Stephanie Susskind, and we've got a surge of reporters over in that area, and of course all across our region to bring you up to date on everything going on.
We just spoke to Brian Garner at 10:30 from Florida Power and Light, got an update on the situation with FPL. We want to turn on the phone right now to Ed Liberty from Lake Worth Utilities. Not everyone in our viewing area is a Florida Power and Light customer. And Mr. Liberty, if you could kind of give us a status check first off and how things are doing in Lake Worth concerning power.
Well, we're doing pretty well this evening. Thank you for checking in with us. We only have 122 customers that are currently out of power. That number has gone up in the last hour or so as this last band of showers and heavy wind came through. But we do have crews out there right now waiting for a slight break in this last band, and they're going to do their best to try to get them back as soon as possible.
Mr. Liberty, how many customers, remind us, do you serve in total?
Approximately 27,000 here in the city and the adjoining village as well.
And talk about mutual aid, if I may use that term, that Lake Worth Utilities in concert with, let's say, an FPL and others will bring to bear in terms of the resources after this storm. That crosses company lines. Talk about the assets you can bring to bear and the additional help you may have access to call in if you need it after the storm's over.
Sure. We are participants in mutual aid agreements with other public utilities around the country. We do have crews on their way from Oklahoma, Alabama, and Illinois. They're already on their way. They're bunked in for the night, and they'll be back on the road early in the morning. So, we're looking forward to having them here. That as soon as the winds drop down and we have a good estimate of the damage, we'll be out there putting things back together. It looks like likely sometime Monday by the time this passes us.
Mm-hmm.
What's your advice, Ed, for your customers? What would you like to tell them, as we know we're going into a steady period of rain and some pretty strong winds?
Number one, be patient and stay safe. Don't be lured into a sense of complacency when you feel the wind go down and think you can go outside. There's wires down. It could be very dangerous. Approach any wire as if it's a live wire and stay away. Don't try to guess whether it's a phone wire or a cable wire or power. Just stay away from it and be patient. If you lose power, you can certainly call us. We may already know using our metering system, but you can certainly call, and the numbers are on the website, and let us know. But stay safe, stay indoors.
All right. Ed Liberty from Lake Worth Utilities. Again, thank you so much. We know that getting power back on is the key, and they'll be hard at work doing just that. So we'll stay in touch with Lake Worth Utilities in the coming days. And, sir, thank you for being with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for checking in with us.
The feeder bands have been coming through our area for most of tonight.
Mm-hmm. Chance Walser describes what that's been like in Juno Beach.
Hey guys, we're in Juno Beach where we've been all day. Right now it rains for 30 seconds pretty hard and then stops, but the wind has been consistent for the last couple hours, really until the sun goes down. You can see the street signs here by Juno Beach are starting to struggle, and the wind, if you put yourself right into it, you're really having to start to lean into it. It's almost hard to keep your balance sometimes. So we've been staying pretty safe, parked in the car for most of the evening, just kind of keeping an eye on conditions. Really, this is A1A behind me. Really, all we've seen are police officers patrolling for looters. We even got pulled over a couple of times as we've been patrolling here. Police just wanting to make sure that we're not folks who are up to no good, so to speak. So the conditions kind of off again, on again, off again, but really have deteriorated over the last couple hours as we get some of these feeder bands in that you guys have been talking about. Back to you.
All right, stay safe out there as our crews continue to fan out. And you see, right now, no rain. Right. We're going to see these bands come through. Sometimes windy, sometimes not. Our crews know when to duck on in. There'll be a lot of that in the next 24 hours.
We're going to bring in James Whelan right now. Mm-hmm. He's up there overlooking West Palm Beach, and that's kind of what it'll be, right, James? At least right now, before it becomes this very persistent rain, likely tomorrow?
Exactly. We're in a lull right now where I just came up here maybe half an hour or so ago, and it was blowing sideways, sheets of rain coming down, and now it's actually pretty quiet. The rain's coming off the roof a little bit, but just some sprinkles and not a whole lot of wind, and that's what you're going to get. This on again, off again, like we were just hearing, and we're in that kind of lull right now, but things will pick up as we get into another one of those feeder bands. The one that just moved through here, I checked at PBIA. We had a wind gust 54 miles per hour. That's pretty strong wind gusts as it moved on through, and just the torrential rain that comes down with it. And we saw that move up from the south, from Boca, came up to Del Rey, Boynton, and pushed back into Wellington and West Palm. All saw that blowing sideways type of rain with the trees blowing all over the place too. I'm getting some great video in from some people, of course, some power outages that we've been talking about there, and getting reports of some transformers sparking too. I have some video for you about that coming up here in a second. But watching the streets, all I've seen while I've been sitting out here is really officers patrolling up and down. I just saw an officer with his lights on move around, and that's about it. Everybody's supposed to stay in. Now's the time to just stay in your house. No need to go out now. And we may have to stay in for a little while here because this is just the beginning. We still have another full day of this before the intensity really starts to pick up. And that will be tomorrow evening here, and then hopefully on out of here, and we can return to maybe cleaning up on Monday. Now, we're going to go back over to Steve here. Steve, I'm in a little lull. You're watching the radar. When's it going to pick up again here in West Palm?
Well, let's take a look, James. Actually, let's break it down kind of neighborhood by neighborhood. There's the eye of the storm there, starting to lift off the north coast of Cuba. It's headed for the Keys next, lower Keys. potentially a landfall Key West or very close to it. That'll happen in the morning. It looks like after sunrise now, and then it just tracks up the west coast after that. There's our biggest and our heaviest bands of rain. This is that massive feeder band that we watched down around Miami and Lauderdale about 2.5 hours ago. It's now working its way through Jupiter into DeQuesta, starting to taper off a little bit in the gardens. And I've been watching some of these little cells that are these thunderstorm cells and rain cells that are just off the coast. They have little short durations where they're showing some rotation or some strong winds. That's tapered off a little bit, and then there were a couple off the Treasure Coast too that we were keeping an eye on. Dave's been watching that, and he'll let me know if he sees anything else. But at this point, each one of these has some heavy rain, rumbles of thunder, another couple of really good thunderstorms, and some heavy rain cells that are coming in Fort Pierce Inlet. We've had a couple of tornado warnings in this area during the evening, and Palm Beach County has some of the wind speed showing up all the way down through Hollywood. So we're getting these persistent 30, 40, 45 mile an hour wind gusts, which is tropical storm force. And there's the West Palm break, that West Palm down into Lake Worth. That's what James was talking about. So we're getting into this drier air, but it's short-lived because the next round comes in the next hour. But that's that entire feeder band as it lifts north up in through Jupiter and that area. There's a better look at it. So there's Jupiter and the Jupiter Inlet, Juno Beach, North Palm, Palm Beach Gardens, down around Riviera and Singer Island. And there's just a line of rain and a few storms, a couple of lightning strikes all the way back. And you can trail that off all the way back into the Bahamas. So that's a big band of heavy rainfall that's coming in. A little farther south, there's Hollywood again. And I'm showing this area. I don't have any viewers here, but I'm showing this area because this is giving us an idea of what the winds will start to look like in the next hour or two. And quite a bit of dry air is actually coming around Boca and Delray and up around Boynton Beach and Manalapan. All dry here, but everything's moving about 40 miles an hour, so it's not long with that break in the rain, and then more filters in. All right, here's a great look at that feeder band as it now starts to pull through DeQuesta into Hobe Sound next, Bridge Road, Jupiter Island, and eventually Rocky Point and up around Stewart and Palm City, and Roosevelt Bridge into Jensen and Rio. After that, normally on afternoon thunderstorms, this would take a good half hour to 45 minutes, but these are moving so quickly that this will arrive in the next 10 to 15 with very heavy rain. A little farther north up through Lakewood Park. I'm watching this cell here. This has quite a bit of rain. It's moving pretty quickly into the coast, so it arrives in the next 3 to 5 minutes, and it's just one after another. The Treasure Coast bands that have been coming in during the evening, a lot of these have shown at least a little bit of rotation or a little bit of a severe weather threat, and some of them haven't persisted, and then others have, and that's why we've seen several tornado warnings for Vero and Fort Pierce and a little farther south. But that's a situation now, so there's a good rain cell there with probably a few rumbles of thunder that's set to move in around Fort Pierce and Vero in the next half hour. There's the wider view, and there's our biggest band there that is moved through where James was in West Palm and is now pulling north. All right, see how rain cooled the temperatures got too. It dropped down into the 60s, low 60s for a few minutes. And it looks like West Palm stayed about the same, and we're still in the high 70s, low 80s. Like some of the cooler air coming down. A little unusual. I got to wonder about that. Maybe a bad sensor reading there. That's a little 264. Seems a little bit cool. That's one thing. Hurricanes are warm core weather events, so it's warm air in the entire storm. So there's not a lot of cold air aloft. At least it doesn't usually come down to the surface. But I mean, I could have dropped into the 60s for a few minutes. So that's a look at the radar up and down the coastline. A quick look at the track as it moves across the Keys. That's right after sunrise, and then in toward Fort Myers. It looks like it's just off the coast. There's 8 p.m. tomorrow. And this, I think mid-evening tomorrow is when we finally start to see an improvement in our weather, slowly. But that is pretty much the closest approach to our area. We're completely out of the error cone now. But because it's such a large hurricane, we will feel tropical storm force winds, and then eventually Monday morning, a dramatic change here, and obviously it tracks up as a big rainmaker. Even by Atlanta, this still is a tropical storm. At least that's the official forecast. And the models are in extremely good agreement, even out a few days. These are wind reports from earlier. These were actually mid-afternoon, 30 and 40 mile an hour winds that have been popping up. And we still have the tornado threat, Treasure Coast and Palm Beach County, through the overnight hours and a good part of tomorrow too, because we have those two ingredients. Any landfalling hurricane is going to give you a tornado threat. We have the wind shear and we have the upward motion from the warm air rising, and both of those will pop up a quick tornado or two, or at least a tornado threat. So the wind speed, if you're wondering, and this model will update about 2 to 3 in the morning, 111 miles an hour. That is early in the morning, 6:30 for the Keys. And you'll notice that this is a European model. Actually, I don't know if you noticed the wind speed, it dropped from 111 to about 12 miles an hour. So this one has the eye going right over Key West and then headed to just off the coast of Fort Myers with 144 mile an hour winds. And I know you look at that and you're like, really? But it is forecast to be a Category 4, and it is expected that Fort Myers will be on the right side of the eye wall. So that is very realistic that you could see a wind gust that speed or very close to it. And we're already starting to see some very strong winds all the way up into Sarasota and Tampa. And our wind should peak at strong tropical storm force gusts and maybe approaching 75 miles an hour into the early evening hours. And then it really drops off quickly after that. Highest storm surge will be on the southwest coast of Florida, and that'll be later tomorrow once the eye has to get north of this area. So it allows that wind to come down and push that water up against the coastline. A couple more maps that I want to show you. So tropical storm force winds stretch across the entire area overnight, and we get into some stronger winds. There is, thank you, I couldn't even read it, 9:30 tomorrow with the winds starting to pull away, and then really improving on Monday. And our chances for power outages continue, medium to high, through the overnight hours. And I do expect they'll peak later in the afternoon. Chances for tropical storm force winds still very high. That is 39 miles an hour stronger. Almost all areas have seen that already, though. And hurricane force winds are really concentrated on the west coast, and we're in we are in single digits along the coastline and not much higher across the lake area. This model is our in-house Vipercast model with heavy rain, and I do expect this hurricane will tap in to that warm Gulf Stream water and bring in more feeder bands and some pretty strong ones. It has several hurricanes in the past that have kind of taken this angle, and you wouldn't think that it would be a big deal for us, but because this one's so large, it'll wrap that rainfall and that moisture in around the storm, and it'll dump it as rain over our area. So the rain models at this point are showing about 5 to 10 inches of rain. I've seen some higher forecasted amounts, but I think generally that's what we will end up with in the end, and we could see pockets above 10 inches. And so overnight, just kind of the same weather conditions. And honestly, what we're going to be doing overnight is just watching those feeder bands and watching for any rotation or strong winds as they come on the coastline and pop up a tornado warning or severe thunderstorm warning. We want you to be prepared in advance of that, so you have some lead time to get prepared yourself.
Steve, we have a question about upstate conditions as well, your estimates.
Could you kind of go over, say, Orlando, Gainesville, Tallahassee? Some of the major universities are located in those cities. We have a lot of people that watch us that have children who attend. So what might Orlando, Gainesville, and Tallahassee be in for?
Well, I can't adjust the maps. Well, we're in the general area here for Orlando, and Gainesville's not too far. Oh, there we go. Ask for it and it happens. We are looking at, now this is tropical storm force winds, so there's a very high chance, 80, 90, 95% chance of tropical storm force winds in this area where Orlando and Gainesville, and this will peak tomorrow night, I would say, probably about this time tomorrow night for those areas as the storm races up the west coast. Now, hurricane force winds will be less. I don't know if James can bring up that map. It should be the next graphic. But those numbers would be lower because the track is right along the west coast into Tampa. And in this area here, we're probably looking at, for our probability of hurricane force winds, anywhere from about 10 to maybe up to 30%. That might climb a little as the storm gets closer, but roughly in that area. So there is the chance for 75 to 80 mile an hour winds in Orlando and in the Gainesville area.
And what about
definitely
Tallahassee?
possible. And in fact, it's possible to get even higher winds.
And what about in the Tallahassee area? You have among the schools, Florida A&M, Florida State.
A little farther west, and that'll be on what we call the good side of the storm. That is the side that the winds are coming from the north to south. So it's a little bit better weather situation for there, and not. I don't think we're going to see any really significant weather there, other than some heavy rainfall, and there'll be gusty winds, but definitely Orlando and Gainesville, because they're so close to this right side of the track, they'll get some weather from this.
We saw universities across the state, and of course, we realize Florida Gulf Coast, USF. We've talked a lot about right along the southwest perimeter there, but the governor had earlier, and the universities at his behest and on their own, canceling activities, and many of them doing them deep into next week.
For sure.
The disruptions here are going to be for a while.
Even up into Savannah, my daughter goes to SCAD, and they're canceled the whole week. So we just had Amanda, our producer, just told us we had a viewer asking a question. Steve, if you would just redefine the good and the bad side of a storm and why they're that way.
Well, the right side of the track. So if you draw a line, this hurricane obviously is moving from the south toward the north. So if you draw a line straight through the middle of the eye here, this is the right side of the track, and this is the left side. This is typically the worst side of the hurricane to be on, because you have the strongest winds, you have the heaviest rain. So here's the real radar at this point. So we draw a line. Well, it's headed to Key West. So we could draw a line like this, and this is the right side of the track, and this is the left side. And usually this is the better side. And I'm going to get into some mathematics here, but as this storm treks towards Key West, the strongest winds will be on this side, because you have to add the forward speed of the hurricane to the wind speed here, and you get to subtract it on this side, because you have the storm going this way and then you have the winds going in the opposite direction. So you actually have the winds usually quite a bit less on this side than you do on this side. And when I explain this, I always have to say, you don't have to get out a calculator and home try to figure out, do the forward speed and the latest wind speed. It's done for you by the Hurricane Center. So right now it's 120 miles an hour. Somewhere in this hurricane, the strongest winds are 120.
So when you're talking about 150 mile per hour wind, you're talking about an isolated area.
Yes,
in a hurricane.
Very, very, there's a category 4 and 5 hurricanes, and usually the strongest winds. Take Andrew, for example. It was in that storm, it was the northern eye wall, because Andrew came in the east coast of Florida. Well, actually, here we have Miami, and the strongest winds were on the right side of the track, because it's going this direction, and that was the right side right there. So, new tornado watch? Okay. Seems a little late, considering we've had about 5 or 6 tornado warnings, but now the tornado watch is extended all the way through the Treasure Coast and all the way down through Miami and the Keys. And it's been fairly quiet in the last hour, but there is a tornado threat overnight and tomorrow, too.
Steve, is this one of the, we've talked about the intensity, which has been off the charts, but again, we look at this in terms of the size, the overall depth and breadth of the hurricane. Is it one of the biggest in that regard? Andrew, for instance, was just an ugly, nasty buzzsaw of a hurricane from east to west.
Not much rain either.
Right. This one is, as you've said, a classic Cape, or now I guess Capo Verde hurricane, and the size and enormity. It kind of reminds me of, I remember Gilbert, or a storm that size that covers almost the entire state of Florida and beyond.
Yes, and that's why everyone is going to feel an impact from this, because even looking, it's still not relatively even near Florida, and we already have these massive 30, 40, 50 mile an hour winds all the way up now toward Orlando. And it's just enormous, but the strong, extremely damaging winds are right near the eye, and right in the eye, the winds are light. And I have a feeling that Key West is going to experience that about 8, 9 in the morning tomorrow morning. I have a feeling the eye is going to go right over Key West or very close to it just after sunrise.
And Steve, forgive us, we've got more than enough on our hands emotionally and otherwise, our viewers, but I have had a number of people say today, and one of them very gun-shy said, oh, and I've heard about Hurricane Jose. Can you allay, if you can, concerns about Hurricane Jose out there?
That hurricane has actually prompted, I don't know if James, can you bring up the whole tropics and we can take a look at that second hurricane? That hurricane is unfortunately prompting hurricane warnings for those same islands that we've been showing all the devastation, Barbuda and St. Martin. It's taking almost the same track as this one. And we have to keep an eye on it. Is this the latest track?
Yes, 11 o'clock.
Oh, wonderful. Looks like it does this. It looks like it
does a little loop out there, yeah.
Caught under the high. So I wouldn't say they're all clear for this, but it's one to watch. It's very Gene-like.
Oh gosh.
Listen, I'm not. That's a long way out, but that's what's happening here. The Bermuda high is so strong, and this butts up against that high, and it can't go any further north, so it just kind of does this loop out here. We'll watch it, but for the next week, it's not a threat here.
Okay. Well, yeah. I think
enough's enough for
I think my head will explode.
Can't compute.
We want to bring up some pictures, and Steve, you can look at them too, because it certainly pertains to where things are gusty right now. This is Delray, so Atlantic and Military, and there's our traffic lights. Hard to see with the water on the camera lens there, though, but kind of buffering around, and they've gotten some good strong winds apparently going through Delray.
Yes, and that's on the radar too. Actually, I think I can actually advance the radar. You have it on kind of an infinite loop here. So that's one of the bands coming in across southern Palm Beach County. The strongest band's actually working up into Martin County now, and this is the what we see with the hurricane. The band goes through. It's about a half an hour of wild weather, and then it tapers off, and sometimes the rain completely shuts off, and then you get a stronger band coming in the next half hour to hour again. And just looking at southern Palm Beach County, a little closer there it is, just off northern Cuba. But all of these bands, one after another, just wrapping around counterclockwise across the entire storm, and more on the way. Actually, if we can, I think next frame here. Oh, we're back into our cycle.
What are you looking for?
Viper.
Here you go.
I think I broke it. There we go. There's Boynton Beach, and there's that cell actually that you just saw on the Atlantic Avenue camera. I believe it was anyway.
Yeah,
Delray.
Atlantic and
That's
Military.
that one right there. So that's just a quick little cell that's lined up all the way into West Boca. So it tapers off a little bit, and then I'm sure there's another one in behind that too. Can you widen out, James? Yeah, it's actually just kind of more.
Yeah, a little bit.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, there's some more there that'll come in quickly. And all of this rain is headed to the Treasure Coast now, so it's working up into the Treasure Coast. So more heavy rain on the way. They told me where this
there's
is.
6th Avenue South and Dixie Highway, also just kind of swaying a little bit in the wind there, the traffic
It gets
lights.
nasty and then calm. Feeder bands, the winds roll through, and we're going to see a lot more of this.
And it can cause power outages, and we want to turn over to Tanya Rogers right now, give us an update on that from Florida Power and Light. Tanya?
Well, we've been keeping track of it. We want to show you still the number for Palm Beach County is over 22,000 customers who are without power right now. Miami-Dade is about 106,000 customers, and you can just kind of go through. You see St. Lucie, 120, and as we head and check out Okeechobee, that is 80. I want to show you some video that's been coming in from some of our viewers. This one here this video is sent in from Brandon Wimbrow from Boynton Beach, and he titled it Just a Little Irma. And then want to show you a more video that we have. This one is from Camelia Ronzo from Boca Raton, and she was taking this right outside her balcony, and she took this about an hour ago, and you can see the rain coming down. And then also one of our colleagues here, Joel, posted this of this is a Lake Worth home. This video was sent to him, and it seems like it may have been a breaker somewhere on the side of the home, but that just happened. Let me play that for you one more time. And Joel shared that video with us. So a lot is going on. Viewers, if you have video that you've gotten of the storm moving through, make sure to send it to us, and we'll just continue to share it with all of our viewers as well. Back to you in the studio.
All right, Tanya, thank you.
That's right. Be safe when you get it, too. A reminder, Palm Beach County is under a curfew. Curfew's in effect and has been since 3 o'clock this afternoon. Okeechobee County also has a curfew in effect, and that's been in effect since 9 o'clock. So just be aware of that, and if you are out and about, you will most likely get stopped if the police are out as well.
And most of us are on our best behavior. We heard Michelle say the storm, the worse the storm, the better the behavior it brings out in people. But that's not universally the case. There have been a series of arrests in Palm Beach County related to the hurricane curfew.
News Channel 5's Maris Badcock with those details.
Curfew went into effect here in Palm Beach County at 3 p.m. today, and already we know at least 8 people have been arrested for a county ordinance violation. Now, it's unclear if all of those arrests were for a curfew violation, but we know at least one of them, a man out of Delray Beach, was arrested for a curfew violation today after curfew went into effect. Now, curfew means only necessary crews are allowed on the road, like health crews, health officials, emergency rescue officials, people of that nature. Now, even emergency management officials earlier today had something to say about it.
We are hoping that everyone is off the road, has sheltered in place, or they're in their shelters right now. Again, we have a shelter capacity over 17,000 in all of our shelters. We're pleased to see that response. We're also pleased to see that the roads are very bare right now, so that's the way that it should be, because, as I said, this is only going to start getting worse from here.
Now, a deputy can decide whether or not they should take a curfew violator to jail or just issue them a motion to appear, and a judge decides on the sentence. The max penalty for violating a curfew is a $500 fine or up to 60 days in jail. There's no word yet on when curfew will be lifted from Palm Beach County. For now, I'm Maris Badcock reporting from the Palm Beach County Emergency Operations Center. Back to you.
All right, out to Wellington now, and we have been showing you a very colorful radar with all of the bands and where the heaviest rain is falling. Let's go to Wanda Moore now with a look at conditions in Wellington.
We're in Wellington, where you're really starting to feel the effects of those feeder bands coming through. Just a little bit ago, it was really, really heavy wind and rain. We heard thunder, we saw lightning, everything at once, and then suddenly it stopped all at once, and now we're slowly seeing that to pick back up again. So if you see behind me here, you can see trees. I know it's dark, but you can see the trees really where the wind is picking up, and also the rain. So that's what we're starting to see. They come and they go, and when they come very quickly. I just walked outside of the car and I wanted to take some footage of the rain, and then really within just seconds it was really, really heavy wind and rain. I was completely drenched. We had here a tornado warning also earlier that is not in effect anymore, but we seek shelter at a strip mall actually, and as we were waiting there hoping to have shelter there, suddenly a deputy came up to us and actually escorted us away, but he at first thought we were attempting to loot the pharmacy there. So there is heavy law enforcement presence here out and about. But just a reminder, even if you go outside real quick and think, oh, it's just raining a little bit, those feeder bands, when they happen extremely quickly and with extreme force. Back to you.
All right, Wanda Moore reporting for us. In Deerfield Beach, high winds and the rain slashing sideways, closing roads. Police arresting, we understand, in some cases, homeless people just to take them off of the streets.
Here's a report from Tim Furlong.
It has been an absolutely crazy night along Florida's Atlantic coast. Even though the eye of the storm appears to be going west, the winds, the rain, we've had it all here in South Florida. The wind, you can see the palm trees blowing. It is an absolute nightmare out here. There's an evacuation order under effect for all of the Florida beach towns. So anybody that's out, police are coming up to you and telling you to get out of the way. The wind and the rain, it's coming horizontal. Most of the areas east of A1A and the Intercoastal Waterway are now closed off. They don't want you coming over. They've blocked most access roads, so you can't get over here and get yourself in any trouble. They are arresting homeless people just to get them off the street in some cases. And of course, there are the tornado warnings. Our phones went crazy earlier tonight as the warnings came across our phone. There was an actual tornado in Coral Springs, and then it kind of worked its way up out from Fort Lauderdale up to the northwest part of Broward County, Florida. We're all just kind of hanging in there, hoping that as it gets worse, it doesn't get too much worse. In Deerfield Beach, Florida, Tim Furlong, NBC News.
On our East Coast, a sentiment shared by so many of us. On the Southwest Coast, well, of course, we know the situation there, the looming Hurricane Irma, its primary track there. A reminder, if you lose power, many of you may have already, we hope most of you haven't, but in any regard, our alternate ways to reach out to us and listen to us and us to you. ESPN 106.3 FM, the radio, ESPN 106.3 FM. Streaming our coverage, WPTV, our Facebook page. We're streaming our coverage there, WPTV.com, giving you as many ways to stay in touch with us and us with you in the days to come.
And we want to thank you so much for allowing us to come into your home and to hold your hand. We hope that that's how you feel. I think that's how we feel through all of this, and we'll be here for the duration. Michael and I are going to get a break right now. Shannon and Jay, I believe, are waiting in the wings to come up next. But of course, our top-notch meteorologist will be here to get you through the night and any tornado warnings that happen as these feeder bands continue. You're looking to the right of your screen there. This is Fort Myers. We'll say some prayers for the people on the southwest coast of Florida and the Florida Keys.
Hurricane Irma.
That's right, Hurricane Irma. One for the record books. That's it for us for right now, and our continuous coverage will be back in just a moment.
It was an evening of watches and warnings, tornado watches and warnings, as we've watched these feeder bands roll through from Hurricane Irma. Good morning to you now, just 2 minutes away from being good morning. I guess we have a few more minutes as we roll in from Friday night into the early morning hours of Saturday.
And Sunday will be a telling day here because this storm will grow in intensity. We saw what happened over the course of Saturday, and this day will be much of the same, but it will grow worse. I want to turn things over to meteorologist Steve Wiggle. Last time we saw you, Steve, you had a jacket on. Now the jacket's off, sleeves rolled up, and we're ready to go for the night, right, sir?
Energizer Bunny. Yep.
You got it.
Yep. On and on and on. All right, here's a look at what's going on tonight. And we do have this storm, which is starting to move off the north coast of Cuba and headed toward Key West. The winds 120 miles an hour, and still very impressive on the satellite loop. And those bands of rain, those outer feeder bands still working in across South Florida. And as Jay and Shannon mentioned, we've had numerous tornado warnings pop up on the Treasure Coast and Palm Beach County. Kind of a little roll there with the little wobble, almost a complete rotation there as it heads off toward Key West. And it could make a landfall over Key West. If it doesn't, it'll be very, very close. And that'll be around 8 to 9 in the morning. So our strongest band of rain is now coming in from DeQuesta and into Stewart, Palm City, all the way back into Okeechobee, and more rain coming in across Fort Pierce and Vero. And here's kind of a breakdown. That's just a very, very strong rain band, feeder band that worked through earlier, and a little bit of rain across southern Palm Beach County, and another line of storms and rain coming in across Fort Pierce and Vero, everything coming in off the coastline. And the center of this storm, the eye, is just starting to lift slowly off the north coast of Cuba, actually moving only about 6 miles an hour. We're going to show you something different. This is an analysis, the cross-section of this hurricane, that cold cloud tops reaching up about 50 to 60,000 feet in the atmosphere, several miles up in the sky, and it's just spinning off that north coast with the core. What is really protecting this hurricane is that eye wall, which is, of course, stretches up several miles in the sky. And as you take a look at the storm, you get that stadium-looking effect. Dave's going to push it over so we can take a little bit closer look. There it is there. So as the hurricane hunters fly through this and break through that eye wall, this is what they see. They see that circular motion. That's what we call the stadium effect. You walk out and you see this big, you'll look up in the sky. Those are the dramatic shots that the hurricane hunters take from the airplanes as they fly through. So this is continuing to move north, and the rain is already working in. Now it's all the way up toward the Space Coast. We have a new tornado watch for the Treasure Coast. We've had several tornado warnings, and we will see more than likely overnight and through a good part of Friday or Sunday. And our heaviest rain now and our strongest feeder band. Look at how long this thing is. It's all the way. It's almost from the west coast of Florida, around Fort Myers, all the way back, moving into Okeechobee, all the way back into Stewart and Palm City and Indiantown, and then trailing all the way off the coastline. It's a massive hurricane. Once that pushes through, there's a bit of a break around West Palm now, and then there's a second one that's coming in there. And we've also seen these persistent little thunderstorm and cells come in across the Treasure Coast. There's another one around Fort Pierce. A couple of these have popped up with some tornado warnings. There's been enough rotation in these little cells to prompt. We've had a couple of tornado warnings in this area, and we've also had some extension of those tornado warnings because the threat held together even once it made it to 95 in the turnpike. There's another one there and a second one there. I don't think there's anything at this point to be too concerned about as far as severe weather. We have Dave watching that for us. And there's a look into a little farther south in Broward County. And I show this only because we're keeping an eye on these winds. Some of these winds now to the south are 50 and 55 miles an hour from Broward down into Miami. And this is, I'm watching that because that's the next step for us. We're going to go from 30 to 40 mile an hour winds, and we're going to bump up to 50 and maybe even 60 mile an hour winds in spots overnight. So there's a look at West Palm, 37 now and climbing, and we get higher wind gusts as the feeder bands come in. There's a solid one there. that's working in to the south of our area, Hollywood, and all the way up through the airport and coming in pretty quickly. That'll eventually come into southern Palm Beach County, and just persistent rain between each one of these feeder bands. And there's our heaviest right there. Look at that. This is a big, big line of rain. There's several inches of rain, torrential downpours, gusty winds ahead of it, now into Stewart, Palm City, Port St. Lucie. All this moving 40 miles an hour to the west, just racing in and tapping into that warm Gulf Stream water. Right, I have a few more slides to show. So we'll go through that trend through the next about 24 hours, actually. So here's early in the morning, 8 in the morning, either a Key West landfall or very, very close to it. And the European model has the eye of this hurricane right over Key West. The wind speeds go from about 111 miles an hour, the wind gusts, down to less than 10. And then it comes very close to Fort Myers as we get into the afternoon and early evening. And that's its closest approach to us, would be later in the day. And then it's heading up past Tampa after that, and eventually very quickly coming all the way up across Atlanta. It still has a tropical storm very close to Atlanta. The computer model tracks are pretty much all together at this point. Even the GFS model has bumped back a little bit to match up with them. The new European model comes in at 2 to 2:30 in the morning, and we'll give you the latest on that. We've had some good tropical storm force wind gusts. These are some of the wind reports. These were actually about 6 hours ago, but we've seen off and on 30, 40, even 50 mile an hour winds in some areas. And the tornado watch, as I mentioned, is now across the entire viewing area and all the way down to the south. And we have a flood watch for the Treasure Coast and Palm Beach County, and all the way down, in fact, all the way down into the Keys too. There's a look at the Vipercast model and some of the winds. Not quite sure what this is, so I'm just going to skip by that. And there's a look at our storm surge, which will be highest in southwest Florida, and the saltwater inundation in this area will go miles inland once the eye of the hurricane is just north of the area. Because remember, the hurricanes spin counterclockwise, so this is the weird thing. While the eye is to the south tomorrow morning around the Keys and Key West, the wind is blowing offshore. The water level will drop here. It'll actually drop. And once the eye gets north of this area, those winds come in toward the coastline again, and this water level will climb. They're looking, I've heard 10, 12 feet potentially coming in along the coast. This is an area, this is the most susceptible area to storm surge in the whole state of Florida. Arrival for our winds, well, we're already seeing the winds. The winds continue to pick up overnight. The peak winds will be tomorrow, late afternoon through about the mid and late evening. There's 10 p.m. You can see the strongest winds for our area pulling away. Those are tropical storm force wind gusts generally. But around the lake, we could see some hurricane force wind gusts. And then it's starting to improve in a big way after that. Now, it looks like our power outage map isn't quite working. Our chance for tropical storm force winds very, very high, about 80 to 90%. And hurricane force winds, thankfully, have dropped. Remember, 2 or 3 days ago, these were numbers in the 40s, about 45%. Now it's highest right along the track. And we're still in the teens around Belglade, 9% for Okeechobee. These are winds at 74 miles an hour or stronger. And our Vipercast model, I like to show this because it really illustrates what's going to happen during the day. The eye of the hurricane comes either in or very close to Fort Myers. We're on the right side of the track, but the hurricane is far enough away that we don't get into the strongest damaging winds, but we do have a lot of heavy rainfall that continues to wrap in off the Gulf Stream and continues to leave several inches of rain in a very short period of time. There's 7 p.m. We're still looking at that eye, slowly moving in toward Tampa, and the band's finally starting to let up. About this time tomorrow night, the dry air begins to filter in, and we start to see a big improvement in our weather. I think Monday will be windy, but it will be turning sunny, and we'll still have these quick showers off and on during the day. We're total rainfall amounts still going with about 5 to 10 inches total. The way it's been raining in some of these bands, we've seen several inches of rain so far in spots, and you can see the numbers just continue to climb in through Sunday, and the models have been pretty consistent in that 5 to 10 inch range. I know some of the other forecasts are calling for a little bit more. I'm going to stick with 5 to 10, maybe isolated amounts that are a little more than that. So tropical storm conditions continue to develop overnight. The feeder band rains, the threat for tornadoes, and that's our main goal at this point through the overnight, is to watch where those storm cells may be offshore and to alert you before the warnings issue that you got to watch these. And we had a few earlier tonight that we were tracking, and we've had some reports of damage. Actually, Jane Shaney, you were on the desk earlier when we had that tornado warning for around Lantana, and we had reports of power outages, power lines down. I also had some reports of some cell tower damage in that area, and that was from that tornado warning that was, I think it was around 7:30 tonight.
Steve, I don't know if we can keep you up here. We have video from Lauderdale by the Sea. There's a camera that's stationed down there right now. If we can bring that up maybe in a split screen, you can talk about that. The graphic you had on Live Viper Max earlier showing the heavy rainfall beginning to move into Fort Lauderdale in the area. I'm assuming this is associated in the same area?
Yeah, I'm trying to bring up the radar to kind of match it up with it to show you that band that's coming in. Just give me a second here.
This has been persistent, this view here. The ocean here at Lauderdale by the Sea. Yeah. It's picked up a little bit, calmed down, but you can tell there's definitely a lot of activity.
We actually had this camera up just a little while ago, and there was hardly anything going on. So this next band comes in, and things start to pick up. And I want to try to get down in around that. There's actually, this is a little farther south, down around that area, and so it's this band that comes in, and you get the weather conditions that you're seeing on the camera there for about a half an hour, and then it subsides and it gets not completely calm, but it lets up quite a bit, and then another one arrives after that. And the each successive feeder band's a little bit stronger with the winds. Pop up, actually these ones down here now, some of the winds are popping around 40 and 50 miles an hour just to the south there. So
I was just about to ask you, you said 40, 50 mile an hour winds, and I was going to ask you when. It's now.
It is now. What was amazing is earlier, just before 6 o'clock, we had a 70-mile-an-hour wind at the Fort Lauderdale airport, and that was surprising because that was very early to get almost a hurricane-force wind gust. But most of the strong winds today and tonight were from these bands coming in, and they range from anywhere from about 40 to 55.
All right, Steve, thank you very much. We're going to let you take a quick break. We're monitoring all the squalls that are coming in. In fact, right outside our studios here, it's been that ebb and flow all night, as Steve mentioned. The squalls come in, it gets really bad, and that will persist overnight. But as Steve indicated, it's going to get worse overnight.
And it's going to push inland as well. And our Michelle Casada, I believe, is in South Bay for us live right now to give us an update on the conditions there. Michelle?
Some traffic still on Highway 27 here in South Bay, people heading east, and they may be people who are trying to flee from the west, coming from the Naples, Fort Myers area. We've talked to a lot of people who came through this gas station today here at the Southern Bell truck stop in South Bay on Highway 27, and this was kind of like their last hope. They were driving east, going from Fort Myers, some of them going to Palm Beach County, some of them going to Fort Lauderdale, and they said this was the only gas station they saw open along the way, running low, and of course trying to heed those warnings and evacuate from the areas they were told to evacuate. And of course, we have seen the weather conditions worsen, so it is a good thing that most people have gotten to where they're going or are close to being there. Palm Beach County is under that mandatory curfew as well, and we have seen sheriff deputies out here questioning people if they've been around, what are they doing out here, why aren't they home. Earlier today, when people were gassing up here at the gas station, we heard a sheriff's deputy kind of talk over the loudspeaker and ask people, hey, get to where you need to go. Just a reminder, Palm Beach County is under a curfew, and it's really off for your own safety because we have seen strong winds pick up in this area. When those feeder bands have moved through, we've had quick downpours coming down as well. We saw out in Clewiston when we were there earlier, the wind was picking up so much that palm fronds were flying from the trees and kind of acting like tumbleweed across the grass, just kind of flying very quickly, very rapidly. And of course, nobody wants to be out in case there is stuff flying around, debris flying around when those winds pick up. So definitely great that people are heeding those warnings. We do see some traffic every now and then, but I imagine those are people still trying to make it from the west coast to the east coast. We'll keep it updated, keep updating you here from South Bay, from the western Palm Beach County area with more news once we get it. Back to you guys.
Michelle Casada, thank you.
I want to take a look at a traffic camera right now as we step outside looking at different areas and pockets across the Palm Beaches and Treasure Coast. Atlantic Avenue and Military Trail, again, quiet in a few minutes, in 15 to 20 minutes, say, this will be very, very active. The wind gusts will be coming. So we're going to pop in and monitor the situation. We have a lot of cameras that are stationed all around the area, and we're going to get a really good vantage point here as the tracks, the feeder bands come through. We'll be able to see firsthand what is happening on site, where it's happening, and the effect that it's having on you at home as well.
I think our Ashley Henson's in the newsroom monitoring a bit of news coming in there as well. Ashley?
Yeah, guys, we're getting a lot of viewer photos and videos sent in to us on our WPTV Facebook page. I want to show you a few of them right now. This is from Michael Griffin. Take a look at this. This is a blown transformer on Hypaluxo Road in Jog Road. That's in Lake Worth. But you can see the light just continues to flicker constantly. Of course, strong winds there are the cause of this. And then I want to show you here our colleague Megan McRoberts. She is in Palm Beach Gardens. She took this video of a pretty large tree that's uprooted there. She said strong winds, possible lightning as well. And I want to show you here, this is on our Facebook page, another down tree in Indian River Estates. She said actually her daughter's tree, it made it through Matthew last year, no problem. This year, a different story. And then this video from one of our viewers, Joe Sweat in Fort Pierce. You can just see strong winds picking up that rain and just throwing it around in those trees too. Really, really windy there, just knocking around. So a lot of great photos and videos sent from you guys. If you can do so safely, if you can take pictures or videos, again, in a safe manner, we'd love to see them. Just post it to our WPTV Facebook page. Guys, back to you.
Thank you, Ashley. It is helpful. It's our eyes and ears. We have our crews out there as well, but viewer video is also wonderful, so we can put the whole picture together.
It will become more active, and activity is beginning to pick up. Steve, James, you all are monitoring a cell right now.
Yeah, this one's off of, well, it's actually moving in across Fort Pierce right now, so it's cutting in along the coast, and it has at least a little potential to bring some severe weather, some strong damaging winds, and I'll put some times of arrival on Viper. So bring up Viper and we can show you some of these areas. St. Lucie County Airport. It's this cell. It's pretty much right over Fort Pierce again, and it's just made it along the coast, and you'll see some lightning strikes popping up with that one too. So Gator Trace, Sunland Gardens, St. Lucie Boulevard, White City, that area. That's one that we're watching. There are no warnings for this, but it's a cell that has some very strong winds with it that we're keeping a close eye on in the next half hour.
Every time you've said that tonight, sure enough.
Yeah, we've had, yes.
Every
this
time.
one's maybe not quite as impressive as the other ones that we saw earlier, but there's definitely at least somewhat of a threat here. It's one where they were watching closely, and then of course there's this massive band that is working across the Treasure Coast now through Stewart and Palm City, and that's that main feeder band that is just torrential rains. Cutting in now all the way back now almost into Port St. Lucie. So we have these two cells that we're watching.
And so for folks who live in this area where you've just highlighted that you're watching these cells, you would say what to them right now?
That there could be a warning issued, especially for the Fort Pierce one. There's a chance of that. If it keeps showing signs of rotation, and the other one is just a big feeder band that I don't think at any point, that's one that worked through Palm Beach County about an hour ago.
Yeah.
And I don't think at any point it popped up with any kind of warnings, but it's just some big winds and rain coming in. I'll show you the wider view, and you can see in behind that there's not a whole lot until you get down around Lauderdale, and then we have more coming in.
Look at those wind gusts. They're all in the 50s.
Yeah, look
right
at
now,
see that to the south. Yeah, good point, James. Even almost 60 miles an hour in Kendall. I wonder if we have any keys here. Well, calm. It's not calm.
No, that just means it's not.
Yeah,
not any segment of it.
It's either down or it's it just discontinued, if you will. But yeah, some all solid 50s from the east now. Lauderdale into Miami, and we are pretty consistently in the 30s and 40s for our wind speeds.
All right, Steve James watching the radar very closely. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.